Oh my gosh, good morning. I don't usually say good morning. I usually say, happy Sunday afternoon. Not today. Today we have Justin Riggs, who I met. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember when I met you. It was probably about 2 years ago, maybe
Yeah, something like
around
that.
that time.
Yeah.
And I'll just say I received a Jesus card. I just call it the Jesus card. And it really freaked me out after the fact. It didn't concern me at that time to call the law, like to do the investigative things, to to learn why I had a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints Jesus card inside of my house, and not just like inside of my door, but like all the way into my living room, almost into my kitchen. And I was like, "Oh my god." And it was addressed to me, and they just said, "Hope all is well. Give us a call. It's the missionaries," and I'm just like, "What?" And then Justin, I don't know. I don't even know how. It was such a crazy time at that time.
It was in the middle of the trial, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Right? Or
one of them.
yeah,
One of
one of them.
them.
That's right. Yeah.
So he did some digging into it. He couldn't find, right? As far as I can remember, you couldn't find anybody that was here. And I want to say the closest temple was actually like an hour and 15 minutes away, maybe. It was just weird, because at that time I was digging into the second anointing. And I was just like, "Oh my god, they're gonna come after me." I mean, it's plausible when 3 members of your family are dead, okay? And it's just like, well, who's in their cult, So, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. I've been wanting to contact you, and I should have done it sooner. Uh, but as soon as I watched,
We the people,
we I always say we are the
or we
people
are
for
the
some
people.
reason.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yes, okay. I always get confused, but yes, I watch them. I keep up with their work, and I appreciate their work. But that's when I saw that you were on, and I've watched you wherever I can, whenever I, see you. And I was just there were so many connections made, and I tried doing it the following week on my own, just using the transcript and just I don't know. And so today we have Justin on, and he is going to take the reins and do the damn thing. Okay. So, um, yeah.
Cool. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen out, and you let me know
Oh, yeah.
how that works.
Good morning, everybody.
Let's see.
I don't
I'm
see
going to share
anything.
the entire screen if I can. Will it let me? Maybe it won't let me. Let's do this. All right.
I'm like waiting.
Does that look good? Are you able to see the
Oh,
presentation now?
yes, yes. Gotcha
Okay,
now. All
great.
right.
Well, first off, I'll just introduce myself really quickly for those who haven't seen any of my previous interviews, and then we'll hop right in. So, my name is Justin Riggs. I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for about 45 years. And about 2.5 years ago or so, I started researching abuse in the church. And through a sort of long series of events, eventually I was excommunicated for the church, in part for my research and for not sustaining what they call not sustaining the brethren and apostasy. So I am no longer a member of the church, but still love the members. Really good people overall. I know that certainly there are some bad apples as we know around here on this show, but love the church and don't really like the corporation that's attached to the church that much, but enjoy discussing, what I call real LDS history. So
Mhm.
one of the issues in the church is that they're doing better, but they kind of like to whitewash their history. And so I enjoy talking about real history from real historical documents. And we're going to do a little bit of that today, if that's all right. What do you think?
That's awesome. And whenever you're ready, because I'm gonna have to like put a muzzle on, so I cannot interrupt you. Okay. Because I'm like, oh. And I just remind me to talk to you about Frank Vandersloot
Okay.
and how he ties in with Mitt Romney, and he's the richest billionaire in Southeast Idaho, period. But he just so happened to be where Chad and Lori committed their crimes, and he has something to do with Adam Steed as well. So
Okay.
that.
Yeah, no, I want you to feel free to interrupt me anytime. Like a lot of times when I do these presentations, the hosts kind of sit back and watch, but I mean, you stop me anytime. We'll just get as far as we can today, and
Okay, yeah.
and we'll talk. I don't want this to be as much of a conversation as you want it to be, or as much as a
Okay.
presentation as you'd like to be. So, but don't
Good.
feel bad about anything.
I like conversation because it provokes things, it provokes more questions, more answers. And yeah,
absolutely.
Cool.
All right. Well, so Kresha asked me to come on. Recently I did an interview with We Are the People out in Utah on the Bountiful abuse case that was potentially covered up by Russell M. Nelson and other members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so because we have, quite a bit of time today, I actually have a few things pulled up, and we're just going to go and get as far as we can in this conversation about how this all happened. So to start off, I want to start with the idea that what we're doing is actually in the LDS Church, they talk about following the prophet a lot. It's probably the biggest mantra, I guess maybe you might call it, that they use in the church. And from the time that you're born until the time that you die, you're going to hear follow the prophet over and over and over again. And so this first little thing here is simply, and it's a video, but I think we're going to skip playing the video today. But it's Russell M. Nelson telling everybody that they need to hold on to the truth that they know, and that the way to discern the truth is to say prayers and to read your scriptures, and also that there are 15 men on the face of this earth that you can trust completely. And I think that is a rather startling claim, I guess is the way I would put it. I'm not a super trusting person to begin with, but when somebody claims that I can trust them completely, then I'm going to go out and do some research and identify whether or not that is true or not. And I think, what we're going to see today is that there may be reasons that we should question whether or not these men are completely trustworthy. So the other piece of this is, the LDS Church has a definition of truth. And I try to be really committed to the truth. And, sometimes I fail in that, and we all make mistakes. And we'll talk about one of those mistakes today, because in my other presentation, there was a mistake that we made, and we'll address that here. But the definition of truth that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints uses is this. It says, and truth is knowledge of things as they are, and as they were, and as they are to come. And so today we're going to talk a lot about things as they were, because we're going to look at some history regarding a diagnosed pedophile by the name of Bill Karstensen. So Bill Karstensen, Joseph William, known as Bill Karstensen, was born August 25th, 1952. And he grew up on the East Bench of what they call the Bench there in Utah, which is sort of everything east of Salt Lake City, and on the I-15 corridor. And Bill had a really troubled childhood. It's pretty well established that he was abused by his mother, and then began abusing very early on in his life. And so the first place that he abused was in a place called Mount Olympus. And a woman by the name of Marion Smith wrote a paper called A Blip Here and a Blip There about sexual abuse in Utah. And here's what she has to say about this. She says, 2 years after we moved from Bountiful, I was approached by April Daniels, which is the pseudonym in her authorship of a book on her abuse, who told us of her childhood abuse by Bill and others in the Mount Olympus neighborhood where she had grown up. I met 2 other women friends of April's who suffered similar abuse from Bill. Apparently, Bill had abused children since he was a child himself. We now know of 26 children he abused. Several of these we have spoken with. April and I met with 3 general authorities to discuss her abuse by her father, Bill, and others. April's father was subsequently disfellowshipped by his bishop. Bill remained invulnerable to church discipline. April and I together wrote paper dolls describing our personal experiences of abuse. So a few things from this. So, we established that Bill Carstensen was abusing as a child in Mount Olympus. And Mount Olympus is where a lot of church leaders lived, including M. Russell Ballard for a while. And so the high school in this area was Skyline High School. And we know that Bill Carstensen was abusing kids up through high school there. And we have reason to believe from the Paper Dolls book that other church leaders knew about this abuse and chose to do nothing about it. One of the really sad things about this is that Bill was not abusing alone. He was actually abusing in a sort of group with David Fuller and Brian David Mitchell. And some people may know that name, Brian David Mitchell, because he's the one that kidnapped Elizabeth Smart later on. And David Fuller actually ended up murdering a little girl by the name of Casey Woody. And so there was this group of young men and adults in Mount Olympus that were abusing. And we have, reason to believe that church leadership knew and did nothing at that time, which makes this story really tragic, because after Bill goes on his mission and comes back, what we're going to see is that he ends up being married twice and abusing children in these families, and actually getting a diagnosis as a pedophile. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know, but is Gordon Bowen the same age as Bill? Would they have gone to high school together?
So let's see. I think they may be around the same age, actually. I think that Gordon Bowen may have been born in 55. So Bill Carstensen might be a little bit early, and I might be a little bit off on that birth date for Gordon Bowen. But if I remember right, I don't think they were. I think they were both on the East Bench, but I don't think that they were in the same high school or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So good question.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we may talk about Gordon Bowen a little bit here today.
Please.
Timelines. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
not fans.
So, yeah. So what we know is that Bill Carstensen abuses some girls in a family, in the family of Nicholas Grosbeck Smith and Marion Burroughs Smith. And in my other presentation on We the People, I talked about how Nicholas Grosbeck Smith was a member of Skull and Bones at the University of Utah. And in that other presentation, Tyler corrected me, but we did some more research and we did find out that Nicholas Grosbeck Smith is and was actually a member of that Skull and Bones chapter at the University of Utah. Yeah. And so this is sort of a really interesting story, because what you have is two very powerful men, right? Nicholas Grosbeck Smith is a member of Skull and Bones and also was part of the Council on Foreign Relations there in Salt Lake City. And then you have this guy, Bill Carstensen, and the daughter of the Mormon prophet, who was also a member of Skull and Bones, Russell M. Nelson. And you sort of get this, I sort of liken it to the mafia, right? Like the mob, they get along pretty well most of the time, and they just sort of stick to their own territory and they do their own thing. But every once in a while, some bonehead will do something stupid and hurt the member of another family, and then all of a sudden you have a war between these two.
It gets out of hand, and it does seem to be and it also seems to be like a blood lineage, like a bloodline war. Also, it's like they're competing. I don't know if they're competing, but they look like they're competing. It's really interesting and fascinating to watch. Actually, I think I'm just like, what? Because it doesn't make
really hard to tease out. Yeah, it's really hard to tease out, but that's how I sort of look at this. I mean, so Nicholas Grosbeck Smith came from he was a son of a polygamous wife of a Mormon prophet, right? Or the grandson, I can't remember. And so he was very much Mormon royalty. But when his grandchildren got abused by Bill Carstens, he ran straight up against a Mormon apostle, right? Who was also a member of Skull and Bones. And probably for one of the first times in his life, Nicholas Grosbeck Smith found himself in a situation where he wasn't going to win the fight, And so I think it did get rather, I don't know if ugly is the right word, but I think it got really messy is probably the best way to say that, really fast, right?
I commend him, though. I commend him for doing that. I mean,
that was
his grandchildren, right? Those were his grandchildren.
He certainly did everything he could to bring this to light. And he was really good friends with Mormon apostle Neil A. Maxwell, and they brought Neil A. Maxwell
knocked me out my
in.
chair. That knocked me
Yeah.
out. I was like, oh crap, no, because again, and I'm just gonna say it. I know I think I have my blur on, but here we go. That's Tom Harrison's.
Yes.
I'm not gonna say best friend, but I'll say a dear friend. I mean,
yeah. Yep.
very
Neil A.
influential.
Maxwell comes up a
Lived in the
lot.
same neighborhood.
Yeah. Neil A. Maxwell comes up a lot, and Tom Harrison also comes up a lot in these abuse stories.
Oh my God. And I want to know everything about that too, because there's not much about Tom. He's just like this curious character that, because he's this is me. I'm just going to cut in here. But whenever I first, my uncle was murdered, I knew that right away. And then the kids were missing. Lori was missing, couldn't find them. But then, things start trickling in, and it's just like hearsay, but you don't know what to do with it. And so I always have had, look, I think I have it right here. It's like the first little diagram or whatever, or notes that I took. And it was about basically come to find out it was really Tom Harrison. And so this is what I wrote. It's just on this big piece of paper, and it says St. George portal guy, Indian is what. Okay, I was told, 75 years old. I don't know what that word is. That's interesting. And then it says portal in his basement, taught people how to portal astral traveling. And I'm like, what? I don't even know what that means. I'm just like, I'm still green, way 5-6 years ago. And now I do. Now come at me, I know what's going on. But so it come to find out, we learned even more to corroborate that. And I say corroborate it, but more details came out. And it was that Chad and Julie Rowe were going to Salt Lake City to Tom's office, allegedly, so that he could teach them how to, they called it portaling. I mean, the word portal is in my family's murder case documents everywhere. They wanted to make portals in the closets, in the basements. I mean, portal everywhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so gross. And so here's this therapist, and then so I'm learning all about how these, like the Central Intelligence Agency, how they work, and how usually when there's murders, I would say, like the kids, like Tylee and JJ, and I mean, not to mention Tammy, Charles, my uncle, and maybe Joe, and then the shot at Brandon. My mom was on the list. I mean, it was going down. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are we doing? And what are we looking at? And it's like, I understand how the law works, and now I do. Or before I was like, oh my gosh, nail them all, like it's a cult. Show me a cult,
Yeah.
And so it was, anyways, a lot of cognitive dissonance and a lot of getting over that, and just kind of reading everything everywhere. And I still do. That's what I do. Difficult research. And it's crazy. It doesn't make sense, but it will one day. And it does, slowly but surely. So what was Tom Harrison teaching, allegedly, if that is true?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what we know about Tom Harrison, just from like court documents and that kind of a thing, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, one thing to know is that Tom Harrison is also tied to the Tim Ballard case, right? Mm-hmm. And in those court documents, what you'll find is that Tom Harrison had given at least one priesthood blessing to Tim Ballard. And it was one of these priesthood blessings that, when you read it, you just kind of have to like shake your head a little bit, because it's basically telling Tim that the adversary will have no power over him, that millions will follow him, that he's in a tough season of his life, but that OUR wasn't his life work. And we see this right now. Tim is, trying to make a comeback. And I think part of the reason that Tim is trying to make a comeback is because of these types of priesthood blessings that Tom Harrison, was giving. We also see Tom in the Gordon Bowen case. In those court documents, Tom Harrison saw both Gordon Bowen and his wife, right? So we know he was a part of that case.
Yeah.
I mean, Tom's a very well-respected doctor out there, a psychologist,
What I heard.
I can't remember which one. And
It's
so
what I
you
heard.
just see him come up over and over and over again in all these abuse cases. And it's not just him. And I'm not really at liberty to talk a lot about this, but it's also the people that he's trained, right? So
makes sense to me.
yeah. So sometimes you'll find cases where it's not him that's treating the abuse victim, but when you trace back who that therapist was and who trained them, you'll see that it was Tom Harrison. And then they're kind of doing these sort of weird, I guess what you would call modalities, right? And and it ends up that these abuse victims have a really difficult time, getting a case through the court system because the therapist that they went to was doing all kinds of weird things. Now, I've personally never heard of Tom Harrison and portals. That's like the first time that I've ever heard of that. But he was involved in things like spinning up a business called Eternal Core that was sort of like a new agey, kind of like
God-centric.
Yeah, just like Tony Robbins kind of stuff, right? Like doing seminars and helping people achieve their potential and that kind of stuff. So yeah, Tom's a really interesting. That I will say this. I've talked to several people who knew Tom and were patients of Tom, and a lot of them vouch for him. Like they say that he's a really good person and that there's no way that he could be involved in anything nefarious. And so he's sort of an interesting character in all of these stories. And I mean, I certainly think that anybody who, contributes to writing a book like Visions of Glory needs to be scrutinized heavily, right? Like I have real problems with that book. And so my personal opinion, and then the other thing about Tom that just doesn't sit quite right with me is he seems to have a hard time separating his work from his personal life. And case in point, there is like, we know that Tom was seeing Tim Ballard for some brain problems that Tim said that he had. So he was acting in a professional capacity.
I found that. I found that clip.
But at the same time,
specialist is what he called him. A brain specialist.
He went to like brain camp.
Brain camp.
Yeah, they called
He's
it brain
giving me
camp.
a brain cramp. Okay. So many brain cramps I get.
And so Tom just seemed to have a hard time separating out his work from his personal life. To me, that's what it seems like. And in that profession, you have to separate those things out, in my opinion.
Right. It seems like and oh my gosh, I have so many things flooding in at the same time. The Tim Ballard blessing, allegedly. I mean, I read it too. It's out there, but he allegedly told Tim that and blessed him, and it's basically a fortune telling of the future, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I have Tylee's here. I have Tylee's here, and her priesthood blessing looks nothing like what happened. It did not say all the things at all, Yeah. And
one of the really troubling things we're finding, Kresha, is that in a lot of these cases, and it's in this Karstensen case too, is we have Mormon apostles giving priesthood blessings to people that appear to have no bearing on reality, right? And in the church, those priesthood blessings, they are supposed to be, sometimes, not always, sometimes it's a blessing of healing, but sometimes they are supposed to be prophetic, right? And that's a belief in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And especially when you get one of these from somebody like a Tom Harrison, or another person that was giving blessings to Tim Ballard, allegedly was M. Russell Ballard. But when you get a blessing like that, like it rearranges your entire life if you're a member.
Yes. Right? It's the same thing with the second anointing. I mean, imagine it. I mean, like I cannot prove if Lori and Chad had that. There's so many different criteria that people have. They're like, well, you have to be wealthy. And I'm like, really? You're telling me the parameters on something that's secret, not sacred, in my opinion, that goes on behind closed doors, behind all the members' backs. And it's like this favoritism. I pick you, and so you win. And I listened to, what's his name? Tom Phillips. I've listened to, oh my gosh, the guy from Brigida and Hans Madsen, they're telling of it. And I remember, and I've never been a Mormon, obviously. I know that's hard. I know y'all can't believe that, but you know, but I mean, actually, when I learned my uncle was Mormon and that Lord, I didn't even know they were Mormon. That's just how much it did not matter in our family. When they'd come to visit, when we would get together, never a discussion. So
Yeah.
maybe they didn't proselytize very well. I'm just saying, you know, it just
Yeah.
wasn't a thing. But I know that my uncle converted, and according to my mom, he enjoyed it. He loved it. He told
Yeah.
Lori in text messages that she is an apostate and that she's turning her back on the good gospel, the beautiful gospel. And for what, to each their own, like I'm not here to do that. Um, Nobody knows is how I feel. And so it's just like, whatever, as long as it's not hurting anybody. But
Right.
I just want to know why this guy, this therapist that people do respect, that people do talk good about. And I want to know why is he touching every one of these Mormon gone wild extremo cases, like
Yeah. Yeah.
egregious abuse of children, egregious murder of children.
Yeah.
It's like, but he's just like, what do they call that? 3 degrees, 1 degree. He's like
Yes.
stays a couple degrees away, just like the church does.
Yeah.
They're very clean.
Yeah. I mean, and it would make sense. I mean, if he's a prominent, psychologist or
Mhm.
psychiatrist, I think he was a psychologist, but if he's a prominent doctor there in the area, like it would make sense to see his name over and over. That's not troubling
Mhm.
in and of itself. But
Right.
when you start learning about the ways that he was interacting with people that are supposed to be his patients, then it
Mhm.
gets a little bit sketchy to me, and again, I'm probably going to get myself in some trouble here. I mean, I've been talking to
Nah.
people, especially because this new interview came out. I've been talking to several people, who know Tom and who Tom, they feel that he really helped them. And that's fine. I believe that
Right.
Tom Harrison helped a
Two
lot of
things
people.
can be true,
That's right. You got it. You got it.
Yeah.
And that's, so to me, I think we just have to hold in our minds that Tom Harrison was a very prominent person who found himself in an area with a lot of cases, and he got involved. And then, in my opinion, he may have gotten involved in ways that weren't appropriate for a person of his position. That's sort of where I land on Tom Harrison right now today. Right.
And he also, I remember from following investigations in ritual abuse with Goel, that it seemed like Tom was trying to talk to the leadership at one point in time. Probably, and we'll probably get around to that around the Pace memo about about the leadership recognizing, or I'm gonna just say ritual abuse. You call it organized abuse or occult abuse,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep. You're
And
right.
to recognize it as a real phenomenon, but obviously they didn't take his advice. I mean, because I follow Lynn Packer. I'm from the beginning, I've
Right.
followed you, and I follow Heidi, and I just said Goel. And I mean, I listen to other people. I listen to all kinds of cases, whether they're inside of Mormon, outside of Mormonism, you know. But it's just like, what is his role? He's got, when you have Chad and Lori and people are just like, oh, they just went rogue. And I'm learning because I'm learning as much as I can, as fast as I can, really. It was just all at one time about
Right.
the Church of the Firstborn, about the 144,000, about multiple mortal probations, about all these weird things that I say weird because they're foreign to me,
Right.
period,
Right. Yep.
and I've tried to look at it from somebody who's not interested in going to the church or joining the church. I'm just there, and I'm looking at it through the lens of my family is murdered. My aunt has gone. I don't recognize her. I don't know what happened, and I'm just trying to figure it
Yeah.
out. And I don't feel like a lot of these branch offs, these fringe, these polygamists, they just want to go start their own church. No, they did not.
Right.
You can't convince me of that. Maybe
Right.
some, but not all. And there's so many break offs that no, it's like, who's the problem here?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, like you said, they get a little out of control. They go a little too far with things. and then they have to sever ties. And I'm talking about the church, period.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Yeah. So like, let's talk about that for just a second. So, I mean, you think about a Lori and a Chad, like, so having been in the church for 45 years, I can tell you, like, I knew about Chad Daybell before all of this sort of came out. And I can tell you that Chad very much, like, I mean, was not really anything, right? Like, he was, like you said, he was just sort of this fringe, weird guy who was out writing these strange things and saying strange things. And like, there's a lot of those people in the church. And so,
Right?
like, when you run across a blog like that, you don't really pay attention. But here's sort of what happens is, say that you get Lori and Chad introduced to a Tom Harrison, right? And Tom is like sort of a mid-level guy, and maybe even higher than a mid-level, because like he sat on the missionary committee of the church doing psychological analyses of missionaries going out. And so you get a Chad and a Lori introduced to a guy like Tom. And because the church is so small, like, it's like you talk about those 3 degrees of separation, you go from Lori and Chad to Tom Harrison, and then you go straight from Tom Harrison to Neil A. Maxwell and M. Russell Ballard, apostles in the church.
Hello.
And what happens is you get these fringe people like Lori, right, and Chad, and all of a sudden, if Tom gives them any positive attention, they start believing that these fringe, weird beliefs that they're spouting off sort of have the approval of the leadership of the church, because nobody's doing anything to stop them, right?
And Tom has to be knowing, or I mean, the thought process, right? Like, he has to know what he's talking about, and he wouldn't lead us astray. Just like I believe any man, any woman, any human being can lead anybody astray. Okay, we're all capable of it. And I mean, it really is horrible the way the culture is from as an outsider. It steadily just brings new, fresh victims in just constantly, because everything is so secret. Trust everybody. It's very insulated. But I mean, it's also beautiful from looking in. I'm looking in and I'm like, oh, y'all can build a whole damn world by yourselves. Like, I'm just like, whoa, I'm still over here I'm like scratching my head, trying to gather
very
my
bright,
thoughts.
very industrious people, right? Who
very well
care about
spoken,
family
very
and all those things. Yeah.
Yes. And it's just like all that. But then it's like the chaos factor. Anyways, I know I'm veering way off, but I mean, it's just, it's because I've stared at it for over 6 years. And I mean, I've found quite a few things that are very problematic, and that I'm just like, well, it doesn't take that far of a stretch to say, oh, well, that is why they did what they did. I'm not blaming it on anybody else, but when you're in that echo chamber and everybody is a yes man, and everybody's kind of in the same in the same waters, swimming in the same waters, it becomes very dangerous. And I mean, I hope people can look at my family and my former aunt and it sucks, as another cautionary tale. And it just shouldn't have to become this ever. And
I mean, I certainly feel, and this is just my opinion, but I mean, I certainly feel that the church should have come down on this group of people, right? It was very clear that they were in a place that was not good or safe. And it was known, right? People were watching. And I don't know the reasons why the church chose not to step in and discipline these people. I mean, that's one of the roles of a church, is to discipline its members if they need to be disciplined. And I don't know why the church chose not to do that. But certainly from my perspective, the beliefs that Chad and Lori held certainly had to do with the church, and they were fringe beliefs, but they weren't so far out that the church felt like they needed to do anything about it.
Right? One guy, he was from Utah, moved to Idaho. She was from, lived in Arizona, California. They were on opposite sides of the United States, but they had that one commonality, and it was the church, because that's how I went in. I was just like, okay, home life. Okay. And then, just trying to figure out and see things through, and I hate to say, their eyes as much as I could. I mean, because they gave us the blueprint basically by saying, the people in and around their circle, like Hector Sosa Jr. was like, he wrote to his community, okay, don't talk about multiple mortal probations. They know it's wrong. Yeah. If you're telling your people to not mention it to their bishop and or stake president, and that's if those people aren't also attending and doing the same things, because I've found plenty of that.
Yeah. Yep.
You know.
Well, we'll see that pensions for keeping secrets comes all the way from the top, and we'll talk about that a little bit if we get far enough into this.
All right.
But
let me change it. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
No, it's okay. All right. So let's hop back here into the Carstensen story. So we know that Bill Carstensen abused the Smith daughters because in 1992 they filed a lawsuit against him and won a default judgment, which simply means that Bill didn't show up to defend himself. But you can see here that the number was $2.5 million, and there were two judgments. This is the second one. And so we think that the number was $5 million. So there was significant personal injury because you can't sue for $5 million unless there's significant injury, right? So we know that Bill was abusing those Smith daughters, but then interestingly enough, he ends up marrying one of those Smith sisters, and her name is Sharon Gay Smith. And so Bill Carstensen marries Sharon Gay Smith. Yep. The daughter of Marion B. Smith and Nicholas Grosbeck Smith. And they start their life together. Okay. Bill Carstensen was a lawyer, and he was admitted to the Utah bar in 1980. And then we skip forward a few years, and I'm going to introduce a new name to the story. Her name is Marilyn Brady. And Marilyn Brady is a woman who works in the church membership department. And you can see here what she says is from about 1984 to 1990, I worked in the church membership department of the church office building and was very familiar with the handbooks and policies and procedures of the church. Okay, so I want everybody to just sort of hold on to that name for right now because she becomes very important in this story. But right now, I just want to introduce her as a person involved. We skip ahead a little bit, and Russell M. Nelson is called as an LDS apostle in 1984 on April 7th. Okay. And then 2 years later, Sharon Carstensen learns about the alleged abuse of her children by Dick and Brenda Miles. And it's pretty bad abuse. Everybody can go to the interview with We Are the People, and all the documents are linked there on YouTube. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over this, especially as it relates to the first set of Carstensen children. But the abuse was pretty bad. It involved what they called touching parties. It involved, having the children dance and then strip down naked and touch and lick the genitals of adults and children and
crayons, objects being the same things you've heard with Martin preschool, with all these crazy, I don't know what the hell to call them. I don't know what to call them except their rings, this is what they're doing. Right.
And so the big thing about this particular alleged ring is that it wasn't just Bill Carstensen, but there was Dick and Brenda Miles. And Brenda Miles is the daughter of the new Mormon apostle, Russell M. Nelson. So 2 years after he gets called as an apostle, this news breaks about his daughter allegedly being a part of a child sex abuse ring. So that's in approximately January of 1986, according to the documents, is when they found that out. And then early February, we believe, we're sort of trying to track down this date because of the We the People interview. We have several people who were in that ward.
I have it pulled up.
If you ever need to reference anything. Yeah, they've testified that they remember Russell M. Nelson coming to their ward. And so we're trying to nail down the date exactly. And we're not quite there yet, but we think it was somewhere around February of 1986. And so what it says in the court documents is within a week or two of Dick and Brenda Miles being identified as perpetrators of these crimes and the police starting an investigation, we went to church and Russell M. Nelson himself was there, along with his wife, sitting with Brenda Miles, his daughter, and her children in sacrament meeting. Instead of sitting on the stand, which is what a Mormon apostle would almost always do, but not always. I did hear this week from somebody that like Thomas S. Monson, when he would go to his family ward, he would sit out in the congregation with everybody else. Wow. But this was a little bit unusual and people noticed it. So they said Russell M. Nelson was sitting in the pews with the normal members. I recall the bishop standing up and acknowledging Russell M. Nelson sitting with his family in the congregation. So after a police investigation gets started and people start, knowing about Brenda Miles' alleged involvement, in the child sex abuse ring, a Mormon apostle shows up to the ward to show support for his daughter, right? Like by sitting with her out there in the congregation. It's a very clear symbolic gesture that this apostle is on the side of this alleged child abuser, if that makes sense, right?
His allegiance. He's like,
That's right.
That's huge. And I
Yeah,
mean,
he's showing his
again,
allegiance to his daughter. Yeah.
he then turned into, today, he is the active living prophet of the LDS Church, the Church of
He
Jesus
is. Yeah,
Christ.
he turns 101 here in a couple days. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
he
but
does.
he's still, because the Mormon Church doesn't, like, you don't ever get to retire after you become an apostle. You have to die in order for that to end. And so he is still the current
And tell
prophet at
people
101.
how do members of the church view, or how, I try to, oh my gosh, I'm just going to say it. How does a member view an apostle or the prophet or the 15 or the 12,
Sure.
compared to other big religions? I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, so in the church, we sustain them, which means we sort of, like, twice a year, we get together in a conference and we raise our right hand, symbolizing that we sustain them as prophets, seers, and revelators. And so in the church, we would think of Russell M. Nelson like a Moses or an Abraham, right? Or an Isaac, or any of those prophets, right? And then the apostle part of it is like the New Testament, right? Like, we would think of them as like a Peter, right? And that kind of a thing. And so our claim in the church is that the apostolic authority was lost from the earth during a period of time that we used to call the Great Apostasy. We no longer really talk about that anymore in the church. But when I was growing up, it was known as the Great Apostasy. And then that apostolic authority was restored through Joseph
The
Smith.
restoration, yeah.
Yeah, and through his vision, right, of God the Father and Jesus Christ. And eventually the church was set up, and this was restored to the earth. And so, the members of the church literally believe that these 15 men are apostles in the same way that Jesus's apostles were apostles. Is that a fair answer?
Yes, it is. Yeah, that's how I kind of looked at the leaders of that church too. I was like, oh, once I realized, how this worked, because you hear presidents, you hear all these different for me, terminology. I'm from Southwest Louisiana. It's primarily right. Catholic here. I went to CCD for 12 years, never took to it. I don't know how else to say that. I just, like, the difference, in my opinion, is like, or at least in my experience, it seems like there's an allegiance, or the church is so intertwined into the doctrine, into Joseph Smith, that it's all together. And so in my opinion, I think a lot of people stray. If anybody wants my unsolicited opinion, I think that a lot of people are led astray and leave God, period, because all of that hurt is tied up into one. You've got, God, you've got, it's a lot of hurt. So when they're deconstructing, it appears that maybe they deconstruct God too. And it's terrible. If so.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's fairly accurate from my observations. I mean, so many Mormons' identity gets tied up in the prophets, right? Yeah. And when they learn about some of the things that the prophets have done, like, their entire identity kind of comes apart, and they call it like the broken shelf, right? Or like you were saying, right?
I've even used that term. Not even Mormon.
I think that's very accurate. It's not a very deep faith a lot of times for a lot of members. It's really centered around these apostles and prophets.
It seems like people like Ruby, Jody, Lori, Chad, all their people around them, and Tim, it's very inverted. That's the best word that I have come up with. It's like, and Hamblin for sure, black is white, just like Pace says. Ruby Frankie actually says something along those lines in her allocution statement while at her sentencing. So she didn't know right from wrong. It sounded very reminiscent of what Bishop Pace said. And I appreciate I appreciate him for doing what he did, even if he was tasked to do it. I appreciate that he did it. And I'm glad that whomever leaked the memo, thank you. Okay. Cause it would have never seen the light of day. I don't think.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a lot about that if we get there. So Yeah, the PACE memo is an incredibly important document. So
Let me try and
speaking
figure
of
this out. I'm not
documents, though, so we have
okay.
the apostle showing up in February in the ward, and so that's sending a signal to the members there that Russell M. Nelson is on the side of his daughter, that his allegiance is to his daughter. Then in April 1986, we have a lawyer by the name of David Eccles Hardy, who testifies under the penalty of perjury in this case, that he hand delivered abuse cover-up instructions to Russell Nelson. And the reason that David Hardy was chosen is that his brother, Ralph W. Hardy Jr., was a really prominent lawyer in the Washington, D.C. area, but also served on several committees inside the church, but one in particular called the Special Affairs Committee. The Special Affairs Committee is not a committee that most members of the church know anything about. It's really related more to civil matters than church matters or ecclesiastical matters. And their job is to make sure that the image of the church doesn't get tarnished, in part. And so
they do a good job.
Yeah, they do a really good job. And so what happens is that Ralph Hardy Jr. Calls his brother, and we'll read this. He says, about 2 to 3 days later, so after David Hardy had learned about the allegations against Dick Miles, 2 to 3 days later, I received a call from an attorney in Washington, D.C. That would be Ralph W. Hardy Jr., with whom I was very familiar. And the reason that he's very familiar with him is because it's his brother. He asked me if I could do him a favor relating to a very sensitive subject involving one of the apostles. I obliged. This attorney asked if I would receive a letter via fax and hand deliver it to Apostle Russell M. Nelson at the church office building, that Elder Nelson would be waiting for it. When the fax came through, I read it. Curious of the contents, I recall the opening paragraph saying, "Dear Elder Nelson, I am so sorry this tragedy has befallen your family. This needs to be kept out of the public eye. I remember having my interest piqued because of the allegations I heard days earlier about Dick Miles." So it wasn't just that Russell M. Nelson was showing up at the ward. He was also receiving instructions from very powerful lawyers sitting on important committees inside the church about how to keep the story out of the public eye, right? And so that's important because in 2018, when the Dick and Brenda Miles case is filed, what they're claiming is that Russell M. Nelson and Dick and Brenda Miles used their position in the church to cover up the crimes and sins of at least Bill Karstensen and allegedly of Dick and Brenda Miles as well. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
I'm showing a lawsuit alleging sex abuse cover-up filed against family of LDS Church president. I mean, that's that part. And then I'm just going to show them a few of these that I grabbed from We the People podcast also. And there's this one, which is Dick and Brenda Miles, right there with all the children around them. That is so terrifying, in my opinion, just to see.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that
I have a picture. I don't have it on this presentation, but I have a picture. Bill Karstensen was volunteering at Bountiful Elementary School right before all of this broke.
Of course. I mean, they go where they pray, Prey. That's what they do. They're predators. So that's where they're at, people. Open your eyes.
So, yeah.
Watch your kids.
Yes, please. I mean, that's definitely one of the main messages that, in my role, like as LDS Abuse on Twitter, is that I'm just constantly telling Mormon parents, like, we've done a lot of work, and from the work that we've done, it doesn't look like the situation of abuse is any worse inside of the church than it is anywhere else, but it's also not any better. But when people take their children to church, they just kind of stop paying attention because they think it's a safe place.
Right.
And so one of the main messages that I try to share is, no, you need to be as vigilant at church as you would taking your child to a daycare. And people take their kids to a daycare and they say, "Hey, can I see if you're licensed and if you've received training so that I know that my child is safe in your care?" And if that daycare said, "No, you can't see that information," no parent would leave their child at that daycare. But you go to church. And I've done this. I asked my bishop and my stake president to give me access to the data about who had completed youth protection training in the church in our ward. And I was denied access to that information. And, so how do you leave your kids in a situation where the people who are in charge won't let you see whether your children are being taken care of by people who can keep them safe? And
Shouldn't
yet
be a
millions
problem.
and millions of Mormons do this every single week, multiple times a week. Because it's not just church on Sunday, it's activities on Wednesday and the camp out on Friday and Saturday, right?
Mm-hmm. And yes, they're constant. Members are constantly interacting with one another. That's part of the gig, you know.
I think that's one of the reasons that the Boy Scout scandal, involved,
Yes,
so many Mormons is just
that's what I was
people are just
thinking.
too trusting, you know.
Yeah, I had to be the B, okay, to my bonus son, my youngest one. He was like, "Oh, I want to go to Boy Scouts," and I was like, "Nope, nope." And I mean, I started learning about all this, and I was just like, "Nope, I'll just whatever. He's gonna have to hate me," like I could
Yeah.
not in my heart of hearts.
Yeah, and
No, I
Kresha,
can't be
it's not
there.
that people can't participate in these things. In my opinion, it's just that
Right?
as parents, we are responsible for the well-being of our children,
Yeah,
and so we
it
need to
takes
be
one
sure that
time.
they get into that right Boy Scout troop where we're as sure as we can be that they're safe, or we need to take them to a ward where we're as
Mhm.
sure as we can be that the people there are trained properly, so that if we're one of those unfortunate people that end up being abused, that we know that we're going to get the love and support that we need. Whereas
Mhm.
most of the time when an abuse victim inside of the church goes to a bishop or a stake president, you're dealing with somebody who's never been involved in a situation like this and has no idea how to handle it, right?
Mhm. And
So,
it also seems like they're enabled and anyways, it's a whole nother
well, they're certainly protected, right?
perspective.
And
Yes.
we'll talk about that. But yeah, I mean, bishops and stake presidents have a really great luxury that they have a very, very good law firm by the name of Curtin McConkie to represent them if they ever get
Preach,
themselves
bro.
in trouble while serving as a bishop or stake president. That's a really nice perk.
Ed McConkey
Um,
showed up in my family's case, my aunt's case as
oh,
well.
did they really?
And I've got my speculations about what happened there. It's actually kind of the situation that happened when she went to the the mental hospital.
Uh-huh.
She was deemed incompetent.
Uh-huh.
That's whenever I don't know. She wasn't indicted yet. It's good anyway. So she filed an appeal in Idaho, and that's kind of part of it. And so I want to dive into that. I've been saying that I haven't done it yet, y'all. But
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
mean, I remember thinking at the time, like, why is she at the state hospital? Okay, which used to be owned by the church, by the way. And then, okay, so she's there. And then, so Chad gets indicted, but she does not yet. And then October 5th, 2021 is the first time I ever streamed live on this channel. And it was Chad Daybell's one of his hearings. And come to find out, it was that very hearing that Lori claims that the mental health technician tasked to her had assigned her
Hmm.
allegedly
Yeah.
to watch. They watched Chad on the court hearing, okay, on the live stream, which is kind of odd, I would think. Luxury, you're in jail, you're not supposed to be doing all
Right.
that,
Right.
especially with your co-conspirator. Anyways, but then Lori claims through her attorney at that time, Mark Means, that um, her mental health technician assigned her homework also to, maybe get you another attorney.
Yeah.
And so it just so happens that Lori gets, I believe, I mean, I think it's safe to say, and especially right now, from what I remember, it's been a couple of years now, um, that Lori called, I believe, the 1-800 LDS helpline, but she didn't get, you know, Karen.
Yeah.
Okay. She got Daniel McConkey.
Hmm.
And then they
That's weird.
then they enter the case and they communicate with the prosecutor, but then they kind of, I mean, I'm not for anybody, I'm just like, I want the truth. I don't give a shit.
Uh,
Like,
right.
I'm here for the truth and whatever,
So are
just
you saying
don't.
Daniel McConkie was a Curtin McConkie lawyer?
Yeah, it was Daniel McConkey. It was
Yeah.
Daniel McConkey. That's who
Yeah.
she talked to directly. And then all of a sudden, and then just know that Rob Wood, who is he was the special prosecuting attorney for Lori and Chad.
Hmm.
I appreciate what Rob did. But there's also corruption, and I don't. Nobody is um immune to it. Okay, like it's
Sure.
everywhere, and
Sure.
it can compromise everybody below them, like it can compromise people. So,
Yeah.
but the fact that Rob was he was a bishop, and I
Mm,
think that's a big conflict of interest, that
mhm.
especially in that area, after
Yeah.
the church had already, in the beginning of the case, when the kids were missing, they mailed, or not mailed, but they sent out emails to the leadership in Rexburg area, in Chad's area, in the jury pool area.
Yeah. I remember
And they
that.
were like, hey, just a reminder, this is a 2010 policy, just to not involve yourself in any investigations because you might implicate yourself or us, is what they really said.
Yeah.
And so that really shut things down there too. And that
Yeah.
really felt like a punch,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're all about bringing the children, pointing the children to the Lord, but yet they have not, like, one time said Tylee and JJ's names. Not
Yeah.
once. I dare them to now. No,
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm
Yeah.
like you. I'm not a fan of the leadership at all.
Yeah. That's
It's
a really great example of where the corporation like subsumes
Mhm.
the church, right?
Mhm.
And you just end up in a situation where a church would put its arms around victims and victims'
Yes,
families,
that
but
was
the
my picture.
corporation is so worried about risk management that they end up
Mhm.
sending out, like you said, memorandums like the one that you're talking about. And it's horrible
It
to
looks
see.
so
It really hurts
warped.
my
It
heart.
looks inverted. It looks in, because exactly, I had the same perspective, like, or expectation, like all the people in the Rexburg community, they embody the church, like they represent the church.
I mean, they literally
Okay.
say they are the church in conference. That there's a talk where there was a woman who said, "We are the church," right? Like, so
Yeah.
like the literal belief there is that like the people are the church. And so in this case,
Mhm.
the corporation comes to the church and says, don't you dare talk because we might
Right.
get implicated in their legal ramifications. And probably many members had good hearts out there, right? And
But they're hugging us, they're rallying
yeah,
around my family,
yeah,
crying. We many friendships, beautiful
yeah,
friendships. And but they represent that community, the church. But yet when the church leader, I want to say Uchtdorf, came in, and Heather Daybell talks about this, how she expected, especially being in Relief Society, for Uchtdorf to, or in the church leadership, to address the community and say, oh my God, like to validate them,
yeah,
or whatever, comfort them even. And that's not what happened either. So
yeah.
they kind of
Yeah,
do it
it's
to themselves over and over again.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Should we go back
We're
to the
gonna dig
timeline
into
again?
it. Yes.
All right, cool. So around this same time in 1986, Bill Carstensen goes to Johns Hopkins and is treated by a doctor by the name of Fred Berlin. And as he's being discharged, his final progress note says that his principal diagnosis is pedophilia. So we now have a diagnosed pedophile, and this is only months after Russell Nelson receives those abuse cover-up instructions. So the church can't say that they didn't know that there was a diagnosed pedophile involved here because it happened right around the same time, right? In 1987, Bill and Sharon Gay Smith get a divorce, but Bill immediately goes and finds another woman to marry. And if you guys remember Marilyn Brady from above, the woman that he finds is Marilyn Brady in 1988. So she's still working for the church, and she gets engaged to Bill Carstensen. And then she says that she got a phone call from Sharon Smith, and she says this: shortly before my marriage to Bill Carstensen, I received a call from Sharon Smith, Bill's former spouse, with whom he had 4 biological children. Sharon called to warn me that Bill was a pedophile, that Bill and the other adult members of his ward, including Dick and Brenda Miles, had molested Sharon's 4 children and other children in their ward. I was angry and didn't believe Sharon that Bill was and didn't believe Sharon. Bill was an active member of the LDS Church, a member in good standing. I told her that if Bill was a pedophile, he would have been excommunicated from the church. And this has a really interesting parallel to your story, I think, because it's the same thing that
And Gord
happened with
Bowen.
Lori and Chad, right?
Yeah.
Nobody thought that anything was going on because Lori and Chad were members in good standing in the church.
And they were also being not what I'm not finding the right word. You said it just now whenever I said that they're being enabled. There were so many enablers around Chad and Lori doing pretty much the same thing, in my opinion. I mean, it's the weirdest glimpse I wish I'd have never seen, just to see their text messages and how they were talking and how they treat children. It's a very weird relationship we have going on, or dynamic that these people have about children. And that is something Tom has. I heard it myself, like it's just like, okay, why? What's going on? What's happened here?
Yeah.
Because things can look like they're normal from right here to, but just when you peel these layers back, it's like, there's something not right.
Sure. Absolutely.
Follow your gut, y'all. Follow your intuition.
Well, so it's funny that you say that, because that's exactly what Marilyn Brady did. And so let's talk about that. So despite the warnings that she received, she did marry Bill. But let's take a look at why she chose to marry Bill. She says in her in her deposition, in the complaint that they filed, she files her testimony under the penalty of perjury. And she says, if the church would have excommunicated Bill, I would have been warned what Sharon was telling me was true, and I never would have married him. Shortly after, I questioned Bill about these horrific allegations against him. He denied it ever happened. He explained that Heavenly Father knew it never happened because he was promised by an apostle, either Russell M. Nelson or Elder Maxwell, and I believe it was probably Elder Maxwell, in my opinion. She says, I can't remember which because both were involved, as explained in the paragraph below, that the heavens were closed as it related to allegations of sexual abuse of his children. And what's really interesting about that language is that's almost the same exact language that Tom Harrison uses in his blessing to Tim Ballard.
And Chad, Lori, he closed yes, they got in a fight. Chad and Lori got in a fight, a spat, before she moved to Rexburg. And I want to say it was his birthday. And he said, Grandpa Keith is not offering you any protection from heaven anymore. But if you give me an emoji or a thumbs up or something, I'll restore them. Yes. Yeah. Holy cow.
So it's a pattern, right? You see this pattern of priesthood holders in the church sealing up the heavens, right? Which of course gives Bill all the rope he needs to go out and get married again. And then, as we'll see, abuse an entirely new family, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really sad.
And it could have been prevented. The same thing, I believe, with Gordon Bowen and Barbara Timothy. She had children from a previous marriage. I even wonder about her late husband. So I'm just how does Gordon Bowen, he's at the damn funeral.
He and Barbara were in high school together. And in those court papers, it talks about how, like 4 days before she was going to marry Stephen Timothy, Gordon Bowen came to her and said that he had been on a mountaintop and had like a spiritual experience, saying that she should marry him instead of Stephen. And then, I mean, just to be really honest with you, that's not an unusual story in the church, unfortunately.
It's a cover story too.
Yeah. So Gordon, but Gordon was around for a long time. Yeah.
The same with Jody. Jody used kind of this. They had similar visions, is all I'm saying. That's all I'm
absolutely. Saying. Yeah, I think there's a real clear pattern there, right? So to finish this off, he says, Bill told me the church dismissed the accusations as false, and that was evidenced by the fact that no church court was ever held. And so I think it's really hard, Kresha, for people who are not a member of the church to understand just how much members of the church trust their leadership.
Trustful. I mean, just
I
mean, because you're born in.
When Bill says, "Hey, this isn't true, Marilyn," and if it was true, I would have been excommunicated. I think for people outside the church, they're like, "Wow, I wouldn't have fallen for that." But as somebody who spent 45 years in the church, I can tell you that what Marilyn did is very normal, very normal. You look to the church to show you the path. And if this person is still in good standing, then in your mind, that nothing must have happened, right?
Yeah. you look for the church to show the actions to the teachings that they've been preaching all these years. And it's like when the actions don't line up with what you've been taught, and then everybody's like, what? And I mean, I do see that part. I can't, and I try to imagine what it would be like to be born into or be in a part of this organization from you don't know. I liken it to like your first, and I mean this, I don't mean this literally, but your first, like your parents are your cult leader, like they're cult leaders, like they're the know all be all. And we are to our kids, like we are their life support, their lifeline, their comfort, their love, their all the just all the things, nurturing them, teaching them. And then they branch out and they start going to school and joining groups and clubs and sports and church, so it's like there's influence at home, and then there's influence to, at least, just kind of looking at it. But anyways, it's such a toxic, it's so bad, and it bothers me because so many people get hurt, and because they trust, and it's like everybody is in a burning building, and they're like, why do you want to take the church down? And I'm like, I don't. Just, can you take the life preserver, and come on, and we'll talk over here. Just run. But you can't force people, but all you can do, I just want to learn.
You bet.
Just want to learn. And that way I can maybe give some good advice one day.
Absolutely.
Just not today.
That's funny. So to continue the story, Marilyn Brady Karstensen, now you have to remember, was working for the church, and she was not working just any part of the church. She was working for the membership department. And so what happened is that Sharon Smith received what's called a sealing cancellation. And all that is when you get married in the church, you don't get married just civilly. You also get married ecclesiastically. And in order to split that marriage apart ecclesiastically, you have to get what's called a sealing cancellation. So the church has some really stringent policies and procedures regarding how that's supposed to work. But in this case, the church did not follow their policy, but Marilyn Karstensen knew what was supposed to happen. And so she started getting curious and following that intuition, like you were saying. So she starts talking to her bishop about why this cancellation was given. And not only her bishop, but she starts talking to some high up leaders in the church. So what ends up happening is that Apostle Neil A. Maxwell contacts Marilyn Karstensen bishop, and here's how she says this. A few months later, still in 1989, during Relief Society, my bishop called me out of class and said that he had received a call from Elder Maxwell. My bishop told me that Elder Maxwell told him that a sister in his ward, meaning Marilyn Karstensen, was making a lot of noise, and that I was putting him, Elder Maxwell, between a rock and a hard place, and that the bishop needed to stop me. Being a fairly new bishop, he told me he didn't even realize that apostles would contact the bishop directly, and that this was serious. So first you have Russell M. Nelson showing up in Bountiful, and now you have Elder Maxwell calling the bishop of this poor woman, and basically, turning the screws on her to stop asking questions.
Intimidation tactics.
Yeah, intimidation, right. So to her great credit, she didn't back off. And because she worked for the church, she knew some really powerful people like F. Michael Watson, who was a secretary to the first presidency. So she goes to F. Michael Watson and she says, I knew the secretaries to the first presidency, LH and MW. I spoke to them about this. They said that the church would follow its policy and not allow a sealing cancellation without seeking input and comment from the other party, unless that other party was excommunicated. They also confirmed that someone who raped and harmed children would be excommunicated. They couldn't explain why the policy was violated in Bill's case. I persisted in asking questions. I never received any answers.
Oh, she did, though. If it's just not going to be a audible one or a written one.
Right.
You receive it, you get the message.
Yeah, so it's interesting. She says she didn't receive any answers, but look at what happens next. In 1990, she says, in the latter part of 1990, possibly early 1991, I received a letter from the Office of the First Presidency with stamped signatures from all the members of the First Presidency, sent to me by Secretary Michael Watson, F. Michael Watson. This letter stated that if I persisted in raising these questions, that I was putting my membership at risk. So it got to the point where it wasn't just turning the screws anymore. They were actually threatening her membership. Now,
her spiritual well-being in her afterlife too. That pisses me off.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So
it's so
dirty. It's a
major.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major threat, right? Coming from the very highest people in the church. You can't go any higher than the first presidency of the church, right?
And you're just trying to follow the policy that you know and believe in because you're a rule follower. And here they're just doing everything they can to, again, intimidate her and to make sure she shuts up, sister. You know, like,
yeah. Yep.
I'm
so
sorry.
This is the point where, So this is the point where we kind of we're going to veer off a little bit here, and we'll come back and finish this story a little bit later on. But there's something really important that was happening around 1990 and 1991 that people need to understand about why the church might behave the way that they did. And that's what you referred to earlier, which is the Pace memo. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's just go take a look. And I went ahead and I pulled up the Pace memo online. Anybody can find this. It's very easily found at this point.
Scribed is a good place to go. That's where I got mine.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so let's just read through this. And we're not going to read through the whole thing. The first half is sort of the memo. The second half is Glenn Pace's like religious argument for why he believes that ritual abuse was happening inside the church, right?
There's also going to be one part where, I mean, it's super heavy, you know, about the allegations or the things that some of these victims or alleged victims were coming to him and telling him about. And I want to stop you there because it really correlates with what happened to JJ.
Okay.
And I believe what happened to our Frankie, Ruby's son.
Ruby's kids, yeah.
So it just shows, in my opinion, that it just is still going on, y'all.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're going to start at the very top because a lot of people read this memo, but they don't read it carefully enough. And so we're going to try to do it a little bit better than that and read it as carefully as we can. And so we'll just do a few pages and then we'll talk about how you relate it back to your story. So the first thing to notice is that right across the top, it says, do not reproduce. So this was not meant to get out into the public. It had to be leaked by somebody, which it was, to Lighthouse Ministries. And I believe it was October of 1991 when the memo was actually leaked. So it was written and given to the Strengthening the Church Members Committee on July 19th, 1990. And what's important to know about this Strengthening the Church Members Committee is that the two people sitting on that committee were Russell M. Nelson and a man by the name of James E. Faust, who was another Mormon apostle. So Russell M. Nelson, whose daughter had been accused of abuse in 1986, was now somehow sitting on this Strengthening the Church Members Committee and asking Glenn Pace to put together a memo on the topic of ritualistic child abuse in the church. James E. Faust's son was Gordon Bowen's lawyer. Okay, his name is also James Faust.
James Faust also married Barbara Timothy and Gordon Bowen whenever President Hinckley had to go do a talk on,
the proclamation to the family, or on the family, excuse me. Yes, yep, you got it.
I remember that one.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So James Faust's other son was the lawyer for Alan Bassett, who was the guy in Fruit Heights who allegedly abused a ton of kids and then got a sweetheart deal up there in Fruit Heights. Elder Packer's kids were in that ward with Alan Bassett. So
when y'all mentioned that the other night, I was like, I've never heard of this case, so I hope y'all cover that one too.
Yeah, it's a really disturbing one for sure.
I mean, it needs to be out. It needs to be sunshined.
Yeah, you bet. So Glenn Pace starts this and says, pursuant to the committee's request, I am writing this memorandum to pass along what I have learned about ritualistic child abuse. Hopefully it will be of some value to you as you continue to monitor the problem. Okay.
Mhm.
So we have to recognize, first of all, the committee had requested this. Second of all, this wasn't the first time that they were talking about it. They were
Nope.
continuing to monitor the problem.
Huh.
Glenn Pace
And
says you
they
have
see it as a
already
problem
received.
too. And they see it as a problem.
Yeah.
Continue to monitor the problem.
Yeah, and we're going to see like that Glenn Pace. Well, we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, they know it's a problem. They're spending time and energy and resources to monitor the problem, right? He says you have already received the LDS Social Services report on Satanism, dated May 24th, 1989. Okay, which report we've never seen. Nobody's ever seen that report.
Right.
A report from Brent Ward, who is a really interesting character in this story, because you remember I said that the grandmother of the children abused by Bill Karstensen was Marion Burroughs Smith. Brent Ward and Marion Burroughs Smith actually worked very closely together. In like, there's a talk from Sunstone where they both sit on a panel, and Brent Ward seems to be very. He was a prosecutor, like a United States prosecutor, or U.S. attorney, or something like that. And he seemed to be very like law and order guy. And so I think we may have an idea of Brent Ward, of what Brent Ward told the church in his report, because of this talk that he gave a couple of years later with Marion Burroughs Smith, but we've never seen that report officially from the church either. So Glenn Pace says, there's also a memorandum from myself dated October 20th, 1989. So there's actually two Pace memorandums, only one of which we've ever seen.
On accident.
Yeah. And then he says, and so that memorandum was in response to Brother Ward's report. So there was a dialogue going on inside the church about this problem of ritual child abuse, right? And apparently Satanism as well.
I wonder if that was like the reason why they even created the Strengthening Church Members Committee, just to kind of keep up with the Joneses or the Smiths.
Yeah. Well, so my understanding about that, it's a little bit off topic, but I don't mind veering off for just a second. So the church formally endorsed the mission of the Central Intelligence Agency in 1984 at a meeting at Brigham Young University. And I may even have that right here at the top of this.
Now, this is something I've heard, that they actually recruit from BYU. Now, I don't know. I've never been there. I don't know. I'm not there. But you bring the receipts. I love it.
It's very well known. I mean, this is not a secret that the CIA and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that the CIA recruits heavily from Utah, right? So that's not really the secret. Like the reason that this is a secret document, in my opinion, is you can see it says the church indicated its endorsement of the agency's mission and its elders' plan to meet and address any concerns about our recruiting efforts and its possible undercutting of the church's image. So you talked about earlier how they knew that what they were doing was wrong, but they did it anyway. And like, when I say that goes all the way to the top of the church, I'm saying that because of documents like this. The church
and it makes me
knew
think about how, when you have leadership who are part of not only temple oaths, but also skull and bone oaths. And then now you have a mission that you're doing for the government, like it just is so warped. You don't know where their allegiance is. It just doesn't seem to be in the church.
Yeah, that's a huge problem that I have with these oaths, because the gospel, Jesus, tells us not to make oaths, and we can't serve two masters and these kinds of things. And every appearance to me, based on the research that I've done, is that these are double-minded men who made oaths that they shouldn't have, and then tried to hide it because they knew that it would affect the image and assets of the institution which they were serving. And that's just really problematic to me. Right?
They don't apologize, and they don't, you can't criticize them. It's a very like-minded behavior we got going on with the elitists, in my opinion.
So Glenn Pace says, I've met with 60 victims. There's a document out there from Lighthouse Ministry that says that they talked to Bishop Pace and that it was up to 100. So somewhere between 60 and 100 victims that Glenn Pace spoke to. That number could be twice or three times as many if I did not discipline myself to only one meeting per week.
And
now that says something really interesting to me about church leadership. Like
Yeah.
if you were to receive information that there was ritualistic child abuse going on in your organization, if I was running an organization, I would stop everything and make sure that I got to the bottom of this before I did anything else.
What
But
is
you
it
can
that
see
they
that in the
call it?
church,
They called it the Boise something, where all the leadership, what's it called? Where all the leadership went, or some of the leadership went to Boise to kind of
oh,
huddle up.
right, where they sort of chastised everybody for not following the
Yeah, and
prophet.
they
Is that the
also
one?
did it in Norway. Anyways, I don't know I'm so tired today. So, um, but oh my gosh, it's there's a little catchy phrase, but somebody will know in the chat. But it's like, why wouldn't they do that here? Why wouldn't they rally around and get to the bottom of it?
Yeah,
Especially with their own children being part of,
yeah.
like it's what it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and so the problem here is that like they could put this to bed by just coming out and talking about it. Like Russell M. Nelson knows what happened, right? And he
Mhm.
could come out. And so unfortunately, what happens is that they stay silent. And then we end up having to sort of speculate and use the historical record, which isn't complete by any stretch of the imagination. And we have to try to put together the pieces of the puzzle ourselves. And that's messy, right? Because like we weren't there. We don't know what happened. And we sometimes we fill in the gaps with our own biases, right?
And y'all
And our
do
own
it a lot,
opinions.
giving them a lot of credit, and it really sucks because they don't do anything to earn that credit from an outsider looking in. It's like they take advantage of that. And I hate seeing people, good people or unsuspecting people, um, getting taken advantage of. It really, I didn't realize how much it bothered me until all the Lori happened, the case, how, all the murders. And it's
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of compassion. I do. I
Yeah.
know people don't like to hear what I say, but whatever. I'm not, I don't know how to talk about it. I
Yeah.
wasn't raised in this system. So it's like, okay, I'm just doing the best I can. And it's
Yeah.
kind of a different way of looking at it, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anyway,
Yep.
putting some
So
simple terms on it.
yeah. So you see Glenn Pace sort of struggling with this in terms of he doesn't want it to take away from his assigned responsibilities. On the other hand, he says, I felt someone needed to pay the price to obtain an intellectual and spiritual conviction as to the seriousness of this problem within the church. So this is important, sort of like coded language is what I would call it. Um, when he says intellectual and spiritual conviction inside of the church, like we talk about knowing in our heart and in our mind, right? And that's when we know that something is true. So what Glenn
Yes.
Pace is saying, that he has paid the price to gain an intellectual and spiritual conviction about the seriousness of the problem within the church. And his conclusion is that there is a serious problem. And yet, despite that, so it's important that people understand, like when I say Bishop Glenn Pace, this isn't like a bishop of a local congregation. The church has
Right.
bishops locally, and then they have a bishop on the global level. And this
Yep.
is, he's not the actual presiding bishop, but he's in the presiding bishopric. And so, I mean, he's very, very important and powerful inside the church.
Member committee, like that's
Yeah.
going to be a pretty powerful or higher role.
And
And
so
he was not
despite the fact,
they didn't have mandatory reporting back then too. So I hope people realize that
right.
it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, I don't know when
yet.
the mandatory reporting laws kicked into place, but I think you're probably right about that. I'm not 100%
I'll look
sure,
it up.
but it was, a little bit early for that. But what I'm saying here is that, when Bishop Pace says that he has an intellectual and spiritual conviction, it's that's a serious thing. And the fact that the church, didn't really do anything about it says a lot about where they were at. And one of the questions that I have about this is, did Glenn Pace know that he was turning the memorandum over to Russell M. Nelson, who had made these oaths with Skull and Bones, right?
With
And
knowledge,
other organizations. Yeah, because I just wonder, I mean, it's just speculation, but I wonder what Glenn Pace would have done if he had known that, if he had had that piece of information,
Right. It makes it's the same thing as if Marilyn would not have married Bill had,
right.
had they done what they said they're going to do.
Right. And so that's like one of the key things about the research I do, is that I just feel it's so important that everybody have as much information as possible so that they can make informed decisions for themselves.
Yes.
And it really bothers me to see all the occulting of information that happens inside the church, because how do you make wise decisions when you don't know all the facts?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my opinion about that. So Glenn Pace goes on, he says, ritualistic child abuse is the most hideous of all child abuse. The basic objective is premeditated to systematically and methodically torture and terrorize children until they are forced to dissociate. The torture is not a consequence of the loss of temper, but the execution of well-planned, well-thought-out rituals, often performed by close relatives. The only escape for the children is to dissociate. They will develop a new personality to enable them to endure various forms of abuse. When the episode is over, the core personality is again in control, and the individual is not conscious of what happened. Dissociation also serves the purpose of the occult because the children have no day-to-day memory of the atrocities. They go through adolescence and early adulthood with no active memory of what is taking place. Oftentimes, they continue in rituals through their teens and early 20s, unaware of their involvement. Many individuals with whom I have spoken have served missions, and it has not been until later that they begin to remember. One individual has memories of participating in rituals while serving as a full-time missionary. Okay, and that's important. There's a little bit more to that. I'll come back to it, but that's important.
Oh,
The
interesting.
victims lead relatively normal lives, but the memories are locked up in a compartment in their minds and surface in various ways. They don't know how to cope with the emotions because they can't find the source. As they become adults and move into another environment, something triggers the memories, and consequently flashbacks and or nightmares occur. One day they will have been living a normal life, and the next they will be in a mental hospital in a fetal position. The memories of their early childhood are recalled in so much detail that they once again feel the pain that caused the dissociation in the first place. There are two reasons why adults can remember with such detail events that happened in their past. First, the terror they experienced was so stark that it was indelibly placed in their mind. Second, the memory was compartmentalized in a certain portion of the mind and was not subjected to the dilution of experiences of ensuing years. When it is tapped, it is as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Okay. He goes on to talk about how the layers come back in memories, and sort of how the memories are. It could be incest. Then they remember robes and candles. Then they remember seeing other people being hurt and killed, and then maybe even babies killed. Another layer is realizing that they participated in the sacrifices. One of the most painful memories may be that they even sacrificed their own baby. With each layer of memory comes another set of problems with which they must deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
It reminds me of David Hamlin.
Yeah.
So bad.
Yeah. So, well, and remember, this is 1991, and the Hamlin abuse, I believe, was 1986 or something like that.
It was
through 1993.
I want to
So it's
say.
Like they're literally monitoring this problem at the same time that the alleged abuse in the Hamlin case is happening. Right?
And shrink therapists weren't a big thing. I mean, they were coming. It was a new practice. Like people were learning to trust.
Yeah,
especially
in child sex abuse. It wasn't like a mature.
And that's Tom
practice.
Harrison. That's his niche. That's what he does.
Yeah.
He
along with Barbara Snow, right?
Yeah.
And others.
I feel like he's the scapegoat of all that,
Yeah, like I said, I mean, like I just always tell people when they bring up Tom Harrison, I said, like, if Tom just came up in his role as a doctor, there wouldn't really be much concern in my world. But the fact that he shows up over and over again, inappropriately interacting with people that he should have a professional relationship with, is the red flag. That's the big red flag for me. And that could be, look, that doesn't mean it's nefarious. Like some people just don't know how to behave professionally, right? And they allow themselves to be pulled in. And that's why we have licensing boards. And that's why doctors lose their licenses and so on. And so, like, it could be that Tom's a really great guy and just doesn't know how to act professionally.
That's how you get Jody and Ruby moving in together. And you see them. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's enmeshment. It's like, it's not appropriate. It's not ethical.
That's right.
And they didn't get the memo. They didn't get the Pace memo.
So I think we have to be careful, like, not to come down too hard on people and think the worst right away. But there is that side of it where it could be as simple as he just doesn't know how to act professionally, or it could be much more nefarious potentially, right? But I don't have any evidence that it's any more nefarious than him interacting inappropriately with people that he was professionally involved with at this point, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. He says, when 60 witnesses testify to the same type of torture and murder, it becomes impossible for me personally not to believe them. So we have it right there in black and white that Glenn Pace believes these victims. There's a little bit of stuff here that I'm going to skip over. He says, children are put in a situation where they believe they are going to die, such as being buried alive or being placed in a plastic bag and immersed in water. Prior to doing so, the abuser tells the child to pray to Jesus to see if he will save her. Imagine a 7-year-old girl having been told that she is going to die, praying to Jesus to save her, and nothing happens. Then at the last moment, she is rescued, but the person saving her is a representative of Satan. He uses this experience to convince her that the only person who really cares about her is Satan. She is Satan's child, and she might as well become loyal to him. And that's very, very Hamblin-esque. Like you say, it reminds you of David Hamblin in that group. And this is where I think there are really strong parallels there. They're torturing these children and convincing them that Satan is their master, right?
Yeah.
Sort of
Same with
Satan is the one that cares about them.
Asia Rain, there's other survivors before these survivors that have come out and, spoken up, and same thing. It's the same thing. It's systematically, it's just continuing on generation after generation. So,
So Glenn Pace says, all of this indoctrination takes place with whichever personality has emerged to endure the physical, mental, and spiritual pain. Consequently, there develops within each of these individuals the makings of what I call a civil war. As the memories begin to surface, there are personalities who feel they have given themselves to Satan, and there's no hope for forgiveness. The core person is an active member of the church, often with a temple recommend. As integration takes place, the civil war begins. Sometimes in an interview, personalities of the dark side have come out. They are petrified or perhaps full of hate for me and what I represent. Eventually, those personalities need to be dealt with spiritually and psychologically. Most victims are suicidal. They have been brainwashed with drugs, hypnosis, and other means to become suicidal as soon as they start to tell the secrets. They have been threatened all of their lives that if they don't do what they are told, their brother or sister will die, their parents will die, their house will be burned, or they themselves will be killed. They have every reason to believe it since they have seen people killed. They believe they might as well kill themselves instead of wait for the occult to do it. Some personalities feel it is the right thing to do. The purpose of this detail is to stress the complexity of psychological and spiritual therapy for these individuals. Our priesthood leaders, when faced with such cases, are understandably at a loss of how to respond. And this is the point in the memo where I always just stop and I just think to myself, why do they think they have the ability to respond to this? Like, until that person has received proper psychological care, what do they really think they can do?
Right. Yeah.
And so, but in the church, they believe in these gifts of the spirit, and they believe that spiritual healing, can take place alongside of psychological healing and so on and so forth. And I guess I'm not saying that can't be true, but in such serious cases as this, it just sort of boggles my mind that the church believes that they should be working alongside a psychologist or psychiatrist. And until that person is stabilized, I just don't see what role the church really has other than loving on them, right? Like
they'll call in the appropriate people, like
setting up rides, right? Like helping them find the right doctor, that kind of thing. But anyway, that's just me. It says, for some extent, so here's part of the problem. Bishop Pace goes into this and he says, Orthodox counsel is completely ineffective. For example, some victims have been told that this all happened in their past and they should just put it behind them and get on with their lives. So that shows you just how ignorant some bishops and stake presidents are of how serious the problem is.
That sounded like Maxwell. Forgive and forget. Just
yes,
go on.
he gave a blessing to the Smith children, telling them to forgive and forget. You're absolutely right. It sounds exactly like that, right? He says, this is just not possible. Part of the spiritual therapy necessary is for priesthood leaders to assist with the conversion process of the personalities who have been indoctrinated into Satanism. Victims must integrate their personalities so that they can function as whole persons and be able to deal with their problems and then get on with their lives. Often, some of the parts will begin to act out, perhaps promiscuously, and a good-intentioned or a well-intentioned priesthood leader, following the general handbook of instructions, will disfellowship or excommunicate an individual. So you have a victim of abuse who has a part inside of them, who, as they begin to heal, acts out and they go have sex with somebody. And then the bishop, because the handbook of instruction says that they have to disfellowship or excommunicate that person, ends up excommunicating somebody who needs the church more than ever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just,
And
you can
that
just
sounds
see
like
it's just a
sounds like
mess.
Adam Steed. What happened to Adam Steed, like I don't know how to explain it right now, so I won't. But
Yeah.
it just kind of he's who popped in my head.
So look at what Glenn Pace says about this, because I think he's 100% right. He says, all this does is reinforce the satanic indoctrination of the victims that they are no good. So these victims are being told, hey, pray to Jesus and see if he saves you. And then they're indoctrinated, they're brainwashed when nothing happens, that Satan loves them. And then they try to go back to church and they get excommunicated by
And they have to be worthy. Yeah.
by some probably well-meaning, but really ignorant, bishop or stake president. And it just reinforces the indoctrination that they received their whole life and sets back their recovery, which should be goal number one. It's the recovery of the abuse victim, right?
Yes.
So Glenn Pace describes this very, very well. He goes on to say, I'm sorry to say that many of the victims have had their first flashbacks while attending the temple. And that's because a lot of these people who do these ritual abuse things, they will pervert the temple ritual, right? They'll do the same things that happen in the temple, but like you said, black is white and white is black. And so the first time a Mormon goes to the temple, sometimes they were having these flashbacks of what had occurred to him. He says, the occult along the Wasatch Front uses the doctrine of the church to their advantage. For example, the verbiage and gestures are used in a ritualistic ceremony in a very debased and often bloody manner. When the victim goes to the temple and hears the exact words, horrible memories are triggered. We have recently been disturbed with members of the church who have talked about the temple ceremony. Compared to what is happening in the occult along the Wasatch Front, these are very minor infractions. The perpetrators are also living a dual life. Many are temple recommend holders. This leads to another reason why the church needs to consider the seriousness of these problems. In effect, the church is being used. Now, I want to stop here for a second, because when he talks about the temple gestures, it was around this time. So up until this point in the temple, members were required to make death oaths in the temple, and they would do gestures like slitting their own throat or disemboweling themselves and that kind of a thing. And so I think what Glenn Pace is saying here is that, they would go to the temple and they would be forced to do these gestures, and it would remind them of the ritual sacrifices, and they would have these terrible flashbacks. And it was right around this time that the church took those parts of the temple ceremony out of the temple ceremony. And I don't remember the exact date of when they did it, but it was right around this time. And I kind of wonder if it was one of the reasons that they took it out. Was because
and at the same time, the satanic panic was raging, that was the whole, that was the excuse, at least.
Yeah.
Not theirs. I'm just saying it was going on at the same time.
Yeah. You mentioned mandatory reporting. This is really interesting because Bishop Pace says this: I go out of my way to not let the victims give me the names of the perpetrators. Okay. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of people who talked to Glenn Pace, and to a person, every single one of them say that he was like an amazing human being. So I don't want to be too hard on Glenn Pace, but I think this was a real mistake. I think Glenn Pace as a human being had the duty to find out who the perpetrators were and report it to law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
But you can see, he says, I have told them that my responsibility is to help them with spiritual healing. So somehow he separates in his brain like the crimes, and he thinks he's only working on the sin part of this. But there were crimes that occurred, and as a good citizen and as a good human being, he needed to report those crimes. And this is the same pattern we see in all the bishops and all the stake presidents who receive these reports of abuse, and they ignore the crime and think that their only role in this is to help the person, the perpetrator, overcome the sin, to repent of the sin.
Ew,
right?
It's so
and
backwards.
that's just not good. That's just not good. I commend them for wanting to help the person through the spiritual journey, but you can't just ignore the crime, right? You just can't. So anyway,
that's the whole reason having church and state separate,
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the reasons that perpetrators love churches so much. Because if you know that you can go to somebody and confess, it helps you, right? get it off your
Report the
chest. But if you know
crime.
they're not going to report it, well, then
Report the
great.
crime. Report the crime. Confess the sin. That's how.
You got it.
So I've learned from listening to survivors to educate people who are in the church and or whatever, wherever you are, but
Yep.
not to, like, if there's abuse going on, report it to the police and then go talk to your bishop.
Yeah.
Like,
so,
don't even put that in their hands.
Yeah. Well,
It's
so
not their-
Glenn Pace, to his credit, it's not that he just told them, hey, I'm only done with the spiritual abuse. He says down here below, he says, it's my responsibility to help them with spiritual healing, and the names of perpetrators should be given to therapists and law enforcement officers. So it's kind of like a Pontius Pilate situation where he's washing his hands of the situation, right? And
I
but
guess
he
you
does,
almost
to his
have
credit,
to.
say go to the therapists and go to law enforcement. So it's not like the people don't have the opportunity. But if you're a victim and you come to your spiritual leader and you're scared for your life because you've been involved in ritual abuse by authority figures, do you think that you're really going to want to go to law enforcement?
Right.
So anyway, it's neither here nor there. It is what it
And then
is.
it has its own level of corruption there too, like you never know. It's everywhere.
Yeah. He says, however, they have told me the positions in the church of members who are perpetrators. Among others, there are young women leaders, young men leaders, bishops, a patriarch, a stake president, temple workers, and members of the tabernacle choir. These accusations are not coming from individuals who think they recognize someone, but from those who have been abused by people they know, in many cases, their own family members. And this is where we start to see where the church has a real problem, right? Because if it's bishops and patriarchs and stake presidents and temple workers, you have a major image problem. And the thing the church cares the most about is their image, their brand, right?
It's the same for Lori, y'all. Y'all know. It's like, no, she would say, I love my children, as she's, she's convicted of murdering them. And it's so bizarro. Like, I don't understand it. I don't. We're like, what? And it's the same thing I see in the church. It's the same. Like, I always likened it to saying that the leadership in the church is like a narcissistic parent, and it has all its children like do its bidding for them, and it turns people against one another. It's really it's really sick. And I see it in Lori, and I see it in all these people that I investigate, but I know they're different people, but they sure act alike.
Yeah. Well, look, this next paragraph, I'm going to end on this. I think it's really the linchpin of the memo. And we're going to read it and then talk about it a little bit. And then I'm going to jump back to the Karstensen case. So Glenn Pace says, whatever the form of abuse, our main concern is for the victims, but, right? Whenever there's a but in there, there's going to be a problem. So he says, our main concern is for the victims, but there are legal ramifications. And here's where you can see the corporate mindset overtake the church mindset, right? He says, we are disturbed to receive reports that a scoutmaster has abused the boys in his troop. It is not difficult to imagine what would happen if we learned that a bishop or stake president has participated in the abominations of ritualistic child abuse. Not only do some of the perpetrators represent a cross-section of the Mormon culture, but sometimes the abuse has taken place in our own meeting houses.
Yep.
This is really critical, not because it took place in the meeting houses, but because of the legal ramifications of what happens if it's proven that it took place in the meeting houses. Because from the legal standpoint, if you have Mormons abusing their children in their own houses, most of the time the church is going to get off scot-free on that. But if the abuse is happening inside of a meeting house, who's responsible for that meeting house? Who owns that meeting house?
Absolutely.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints owns that meeting house, and they are legally liable for what happens inside of those meeting houses.
Fun fact, Chad Daybell had keys because he was a ward clerk at the time of all the murders. And that was actually, I've got Goel on the phone one night, and to ask someone who, it's such a difficult and predicament that I was thrown in, I believe, because I'm asking, I think, good questions, like, I don't put it past Chad to have ritualistically possibly maybe passed the children through. And that's so gross, right? And I was like, oh my God, I don't even want to ask you this question. Like, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of myself for even having to ask it.
Yeah.
But these things do take place. And I mean, I was surprised when Goel responded immediately. He was like, well, there'd have to be probable cause. And I was like, whoa, I'm still getting over the question I just asked you that I had to build myself up to ask.
Right.
But I mean, I don't want to offend anybody, but I also don't want any dark arts going on.
Sure.
Especially when there's been rumors of dark arts being
Sure.
practiced by Chad and others in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I can just tell you, I mean, like one of the sort of strange things about Mormon meeting houses is that they sit empty most of the week, quite a bit of the week compared to other churches, right? Like other churches run a daycare, or they have a soup kitchen, or they feed it's not feed the homeless, but let the homeless come in or whatever. Like Mormon churches are used on Sundays and Wednesdays usually for activities, and then Saturdays for other activities. But a lot of the time they're just sitting empty. And so if you do have keys to the church, like you can be relatively assured that during certain times of the week, you can go there and know that you're not going to be bothered, right? Like there's always the risk.
It's like
the risk of
nefarious.
being caught.
It's nefarious when I put it in the context of Chad. Yes. Because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have no good thoughts. But I know that's not how it is everywhere, so.
So, I mean, I think it's, I don't know that I'd say it's probable, but it's certainly possible. And I've spoken with multiple victims who claim that abuse happened inside of church buildings, including temples. So,
I mean, Alex Cox felt so confident that he laid in wait, at 2.6 miles down the road, right before Tammy's murder. And he also laid in wait before he went to go shoot at Brandon at the Gilbert Temple there. It's like he felt so comfortable to be there, or maybe he got the Wi-Fi. I don't know, but it's just interesting.
Yep.
And it should at least be talked about,
Yes.
like we're doing.
Yes. Well, so that's I'm really glad you brought that up. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up because that's, again, like for me, I don't have all the answers. A lot of people on Twitter like to come at me as though I'm like supposed to be some sort of expert and that I'm supposed to know that I know answers that other people don't. Like I don't. I'm just a guy who does research.
That's
right?
why I don't have
a guy who like looks at newspapers. And I just want to have the conversation. So I'm so glad you brought that up because like that's all I'm looking for is to start the conversation. I have some opinions and I have some preliminary conclusions on things that I've seen. And I govern my life by my conclusions, but in the end, I just want to have the conversation, and we should be allowed to have the conversation without fear of being excommunicated,
retaliated.
Being retaliated against.
Oh, good. I'm glad we agree on that, and that's what this channel has been. Because, like I said, I don't have Q&As because I don't have the answers either. But I just we talk about these things, and my community, this is what we do. So
it's important for our healing. I don't know how you don't heal if you don't talk about it. Like my therapist, I've gone to therapists a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite therapists told me, like, Justin, secrets make you sick. You've got to stop keeping the secrets. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're doing is so important. And I really commend you for it.
You too. Thank you. And
so we already talked about the $5 million default judgment against Bill Karstensen. So we're going to skip over that. So unfortunately, in 1995, Marilyn Karstensen becomes aware of Bill's abuse of her children. But again, Marilyn Karstensen, I said it on Meet the People, and the more I think about it, the more I really believe it's like she's really just sort of a hero to me. She is like, out of all the people in this suit, she's the least powerful. She's just sort of a normal Mormon. She works for the church in a job that would be considered sort of lower level, but she's the one who does everything right. Like when she gets an intuition that something's wrong, she asks the right questions. When she sees the policy not being followed, she doesn't cower in front of authority. She goes and she demands answers. And when she finds out about the abuse of her children, she says, I immediately separated from Bill. I reported to the police, which is exactly what you should do. And then she says, before Bill could be prosecuted for these crimes against my children, he committed suicide. So you can see that as the walls closed in around Bill Karstensen, he decided to take the easy way out instead of facing the music on his crimes.
And it happens all too often.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
it's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad all the way around. Nobody wins. There's no winners in all this.
Yeah.
Same with the murder cases. Like it's there's no winning. There's
Yeah.
no big relief whenever, you know, I'm sure they felt relieved that he wouldn't harm anybody else, but it doesn't give you answers or like you said, healing.
Yeah.
Same when they go to prison for life, it's just, or 7 lives or whatever. It's just like, okay.
Right. Yeah. It just
It
doesn't
doesn't bring
feel
anything
complete.
back. It doesn't make the children innocent again. It doesn't bring the dead people back, to life. It they're gone.
Yeah. I mean, and
These
that's,
are,
there's a whole conversation around that. I think the justice system, unfortunately, they try to make people whole, but unfortunately with some crimes, you can't be made whole again. And I think the types of crimes that your family experienced are those types of crimes. And all you can do is do the best you can to make people whole again. But in the end, like you said, how do you heal from that? You can't bring the kids back.
You make it count though. Like that's what I want to do. Lori said, doesn't count for me. She'd slap her hand on the counter. Yes. But we're making it count because my family and Tammy and Joe, they didn't die in vain. And so that's what we have to do in my opinion. And
so
I
what do
mean,
they
you're
say? They
welcome.
say the best revenge is to live well and happily.
Right. Yeah. To walk out of that courtroom when she was sentenced just recently here in Arizona, that was the most, I was just like, well, that's pretty easy,
Yeah.
But like you said, Marilyn, she reminds me of like how Nancy Joe, the woman who went on a date with my uncle the night before and had been, they had been kind of talking, but she's really a good representative of the church, in my opinion. I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
She carries
It
herself
may sound
well.
corny, but it may sound a little bit corny, but we always hear from the scriptures, the first will be last and the last shall be first.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at this story and I just look at again, Marilyn just had no power in this situation. She was going up against Mormon royalty, and yet she never stepped down. And it's hard because she did get married to him despite being warned. And I know that bothers a lot of people.
Yeah, but there was an ex-wife warning you. I mean, how many
That's
of us
right.
are going to that serious? Like, oh my God, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm gonna show you. I mean, that's the first thing I thought of was like, okay, yeah. I mean,
so anyway, I really think Marilyn really
she was
set a really good example for members of the church about how to handle a situation like this.
Yes. And you lead by example, in my opinion. That's a lot of these people and a lot of, I'd say, misled people that I observe in this space, in this community, are the ones that talk it, but they don't walk it. There's no action for the words that are coming out of their mouths. When Lori, I know this is my experience, so I bring her up a lot, but for her to say that she loves her kids, that she saw Jesus and he gave her this mission, and I'm just like, oh my God, what if everybody
that's another thing that I say all the
time.
So that's another thing that I say all the time is anybody can say anything, but actions reveal intent.
Yes.
So we have to be so careful, around people can say anything and it can sound beautiful and it can make us feel emotional. But we have to look at the actions of the people that we're choosing to
trust. Have to hold them accountable. And then everybody has to be held accountable. And nobody is exempt from this. The Pope, nobody.
Yeah, I agree.
Nobody.
I agree. So under normal circumstances, this would be sort of the end of the story with Bill committing suicide. But then something really interesting happens. And the Utah legislature passes a law called 78B-2-308, which extends the statute of limitations in sex abuse cases. And this happens in 2016. And so what ends up happening is that those who were abused by Bill Carstensen find a lawyer, or the lawyer finds them. I'm not exactly sure how that happened. And they decide to file a lawsuit. But in between that, a young man by the name of Justin Hoyman disappears from Salt Lake City. And in all the news coverage, you're only going to see the name Justin Hoyman. But when you put two and two together and you read the court documents in 2018, what you realize is that this is actually Justin Carstensen Hoyman. And this is the biological son of Marilyn Brady and Bill Carstensen, who had his name changed to Hoyman because after Bill committed suicide, Marilyn got married again. And the father figure for Justin was this Hoyman man. And so they changed his name legally to Hoyman. And so nobody really realizes what's happened here. But he disappears, and Justin had a hard life. You know, he obviously he was sexually abused by Bill growing up, and then he had, I think it was a soccer injury, if I remember, some sort of injury, and was prescribed painkillers, got addicted to painkillers, ended up committing crime, spent some time in jail. And in 2017, he was trying to put his life back together, and he was in a halfway house where he could go out and work during the day and then come home and be with other, you know, incarcerated people in the evening. And he had called his mom in the morning.
Let me,
yeah,
I know I did it inappropriate, but
yeah,
sound like, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yep. So he called his mother on November 20th in the morning and said he wanted to meet up for lunch with her, and then never showed up. And he disappeared, you know, on that day. And then, you know, it's actually really, I mean, it's happy and sad. So when I recorded the We the People interview, we did not know, but the day after I recorded that interview, I found out that they've actually found Justin's remains. So from 2017 to 2025, he was presumed dead, but not only a few months ago, they actually found his remains in a pond in West Valley City, I want to say, or something like that.
Dude,
and so we now know that Justin, you know, is dead. And I did see an interview with his mom, which helped me feel better about it because she just seemed to be very relieved and very happy. And there was an interview with her and the man who found the skull that was in the pond. And so I think it's good. I think that closes a chapter for the family and that kind of thing. And so, because like you said, I mean, until you know, you just always have hope, right? And so, anyway, just to update, a little bit of an update from since the We the People interview, we now know that Justin, you know, is dead. We don't know the manner of death or anything like that, but we do know that he's gone. So
I pulled this up. I mean, just so I can share, you know, just photos with everybody. I'm sorry, Justin. Like, are you okay? I mean, because I was going to tell you just how much I admire how you advocate for this kid. I've never heard of him other than you.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I've never met the family.
You don't have to.
I care very deeply about the case, and it's so tragic to me that it unfolds in this manner and that nobody knows about it.
And it's senseless.
Yeah, and so like, I mean, because you got to remember, we started this back in the late 60s and early 70s with Bill Karstensen abusing children as a child, and there are so many places along the line where this could have been stopped. But I've also often stopped to think about that if it had been stopped, there would be no Justin Hoyman, right? Because if they had locked him up, he never would have been born. And so like, this is sort of a deeper philosophical conversation, but like when bad things happen, you have to just remember that like Justin would have never existed. And from everything that I can gather, Justin brought a great deal of joy to many people's lives. And so do we say, oh gosh, I wish Justin had never been born? Or do we just say, it's so unfortunate that this man was never stopped, but we're grateful for the time that Justin had and the good that he did in the world. But it is senseless that he had to go through what he did and live the life that he did. And I think a lot of people struggle to believe in God for reasons just like this. Like, how do you explain this story if God exists? You know?
Yeah. Why would he let this happen? Yeah.
Why would he let this happen? That's always the question.
It's called free agency in your, you know, in your culture, and it's called free will in others. And because I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but
I choose, you know, I choose to believe in a good and gracious God. And I choose to believe that God sent Justin to this world for a purpose. And part of the purpose may be to finish this story of the terrible abuse of Bill Karstensen, because I think when people understand that it's not just one or two kids, that it's, you know, dozens of kids, and then you end up with the Justin Hoyman story. Like, I don't know how people can just sit on their hands and not do anything after learning the truth about this situation personally. So you ask if I'm okay. Like, yeah, I mean, I never knew Justin. I don't know the family. You know, I'm emotionally invested in the sense that I care deeply about people who are abused. Justin's story is a tragic one, but in the end, like watching that interview with Marilyn and the man who found Justin's bones, it brought a lot of peace to my heart, because I see that if Marilyn can be happy and have peace, then why would Justin Riggs not be happy and have peace? Right.
Yeah.
So
Trust me. I mean, this is kind of what we've dealt with. I mean,
yeah,
at one point, I think had it not been for my parents and just the refusal to just let Lori walk away and to accept the fact that, okay, I'll just be alienated from him, from
yeah,
JJ until he's 18, knowing what already had happened to my mom's brother, to her brother, to my uncle, to our family. But I mean, this, like you say, these things happen whenever I okay, so I had like a little parental alienation for 6 years away from my son, which is my mom's first grandson. And I think
mm,
had my mom not had that experience, I don't think she would have knee jerked right into JJ, maybe had that
yeah,
not happened to her already. So it's like, oh my gosh, the trajectory thing, it's like, okay.
sure,
And I just commend them for holding Lori accountable, holding Chad
yeah,
accountable, holding these people accountable. And that's what this world needs because kids are dying
yeah,
I mean, steadily. They're getting hurt. They're fall through the cracks, the vulnerable, the children. It bothers me too.
yeah.
So you're human. I'm human. This is what we do.
Well, yeah. I mean, and like when I look at it, I've just sort of come to the conclusion that a lot of life is about not allowing, but having evil things happen to us without us
Mhm.
becoming evil. Like that's sort of the test, right?
Oh yeah.
Like how do we deal with the evil things that happen to us? Do we become evil ourselves, or do we
Yeah.
overcome and live good, productive lives, helping other
Yeah,
people, learning
it's
how to serve,
hard.
and that kind of thing? So
It's hard, but I mean, in the throes of evil, there's also the beautiful side, God's side. Like God's
yeah,
army, God's everybody from all over the world. And I mean, I've had the chance to, chat with them in this community and other communities. And I mean, they just are it's the most beautiful thing too. So there is the positive, as above, so below, they say, but
hmm
there's
yeah,
there's the other side too. It's just not as it's not as popular to talk about,
yeah,
because we have to expose it's a promise I made to my family members after, they were already gone, but it's like I made a vow to, like, not stop digging, not stop talking about all this until everyone with my family's blood on their hands is held accountable. And then I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a big one," like, no,
right,
like, that's a unattainable kind of thing.
yes,
So I was like, "Okay, exposure, expose." And so I think that's fair, because
yeah,
nothing I do is also not gonna bring them back. So, but I just wanna make their lives count. I want to share them with people because they were real and they were
yeah,
loved and they were extinguished because people are playing God, because people believe they can be gods in this area. It's like,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but I just wanna make it count.
sure,
This
yeah, that's
weekend is
beautiful.
the weekend that Tylee Wood was murdered 6 years ago. Am I right? 9, 21, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Y'all, I don't know. But and then JJ a couple weeks later, this today actually is September 7th, and this is the day that Chad Daybell's company, Spring Creek Book Publishing Company, sponsored an OUR Rescue Rexburg
Mm,
run in Rexburg that we were under the assumption that Tammy was training for, okay? All these years. We thought she was training for it. We were wrong.
yeah,
Uh, we found out that Joseph Murray, which is Emma Daybell's husband, that's Chad Daybell's son-in-law, he was a director for the race.
okay,
He went on a BYU radio interview to promote the run. And so here we have Chad Daybell promoting Tim Ballard's company
yeah,
in Rexburg the weekend that Tylee Ryan is murdered. And this kind of trickled out. I didn't expect it. I was like, "Whoa, what they just say?" And nobody has reacted the way that I'm like, "Hello," like this is huge to me.
yeah.
And it should,
Yeah, I mean, it's
I
a
don't know.
it's a small universe,
More.
especially up there in Utah and Idaho. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
But Tom Harrison, I'm telling you. I'm just like, I wanna know. I wanna know. Like, I wanna continue, like,
I wish
not reading.
Tom would talk. I mean, that's the
I do
most
too.
frustrating thing about all this is the number of people who refuse. And I understand that in some cases they can't. You know, like there are cases where there are sealed records and so on and so forth.
This
And so
is
like I
not one
get
of
that.
them.
But yeah. So
This is not one of them. He is actually a therapist, and he is trained, to do that, to talk. So, it's like, "Come on, dude." You know,
yeah, I
and
think
how there's feelings
sorry.
of persecution complex going on
Yeah, I mean,
because
I can only imagine Tom is probably a little bit afraid to come forward about anything because I mean he is so connected to so much of this that like if you come forward about one case, everybody's going to ask you about every case. And I mean, he's
if
older, you know, like I'm sure he
if
just
there's
wants to
nothing
enjoy his life,
there,
you know.
if there's
But
nothing, if you're not, you know, part of the problem, I mean, I'm just saying, to me, it's like is that why you're not coming forward? I know that non-confrontational thing, like Lori didn't like to be confrontational, and I'm like, really? Pretty confrontational, lady. But I mean, I understand that too, you know. Anyways, but he would have already gotten the worst over with, so to speak. And if you're not part of, you know, this belief system, okay, then you have nothing to worry about, right? Make
right,
make your name clean. It's, I mean, right? Because if it's the truth, then it'll set you free, Tom. You know,
right,
portal everywhere, portal over here. We want to know about this portaling thing. I
right,
do,
yeah.
but
No, I mean,
I
I
mean, because
think that's
it went into why Lori wanted to get rid of my uncle. She said that he blocked her gifts, so they
hmm,
considered portaling and astral traveling and whatever remote viewing. Same thing, Janet Russell. Oh my gosh, I could go on and on, but
yeah, that's
uh,
crazy. I mean, it's
it's just a
just
lot
it's
of interwovenness, you know, and it does. They do the Mormon door is what I call it. It very much, you know, Hawaii. Everybody goes to freaking Hawaii. Even the children in this story, they
yeah.
go to the grandparents' house in Hawaii, and
Oh, right, the Smith children. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
yeah,
after the abuse comes out, the grandparents they own a condo in Hawaii, and so they go take a trip to Hawaii. You're absolutely right.
yeah. I was just like, well, god dang, it's an every dang story almost.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's just like a migration pattern. It's pretty cool. I don't know. I mean, I think we're all human, and instead of labels, whether you're Mormon or Christian or atheist or whatever you are, like we're human and we have to human together. We have to human and we have to be compassionate and nice and respectful, considerate, compassionate, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, we all need love, you know? We all do. We don't
Yeah,
know what someone else is going through. And so if
yeah,
we can just human together with no labels, no genders, just be nice. Don't actually Justin, I know you're not a cusser, but I don't mean this derogatory, but just don't be an asshole. It's so simple.
right.
You know,
Yep,
like just
yep.
don't be an asshole. Hurt people, they do. So thank you so much for coming on. I would like to have you on regularly. So,
Yeah, I'd love to come back. Yeah.
and I'm telling you, I might have to just let you come on by yourself so I don't interrupt you. Like, man,
I don't know. I don't know that anybody wants to sit and listen to me just talk to myself for 2 hours. That's
I do it all the time.
that's funny.
But I mean, no, you interact with the audience, you know, they're here and they're so smart. They're so much smarter than all. It's just such a concerted effort, you know.
Yeah,
Everybody just trying to figure it out. And then I see them at other places, other chats, other channels, and applying it. You know, it's just really cool how we all just kind of ships passing and for just a short time.
yeah, yeah,
Anyways, it's pretty cool.
yeah. Well,
But
hey, let
thank you
me
for coming.
finish up this Miles case, and then I'll
Oh,
let you ask any other questions you want. So, in
oh,
2017, Justin Hoyman disappears. In 2018, the Doe's versus Miles case is filed, and this is the case where they accuse Dick and Brenda Miles of being part of the abuse, as well as using their influence in the church to interfere with both church discipline and criminal investigations. So one of the really interesting things is that the case was filed on October 3rd. We don't know exactly when, but sometime that morning. And within hours, the Deseret News, which is the church's, what I consider the church's propaganda arm, they publish an article stating that there's no influence in the Miles case. And in the We the People interview, I went through and read that whole article. I don't think we're going to do it today, but the basic idea is this.
Yeah.
In the entire article, they never use the name of the diagnosed pedophile, Bill Karstensen. Okay.
He's in space.
They never mention the second family because the churches or the Mileses, however you want to put that, the legal strategy of them was to try to tie this to Barbara Snow and Satanic Panic. Mm-hmm. And so they never mentioned the victim group 2, which never had any interaction with Barbara Snow. There's nothing even closely related to Satanic Panic. But what there is that at least one of the girls in that family had to have multiple surgeries when she was 15 years old to repair the damage done to her by Bill Karstensen. And so, like, out of all the things that happen in this, like, probably the one thing that I'm like the most disappointed in terms of like the church's reaction is this Deseret News article that is just a straight up propaganda piece. It's like a look here, not there sort of situation.
And they do this a lot, Justin. I'm telling you.
Yeah. And so it's really upsetting to me. And to make it even worse for me is the lawyer who was representing Dick and Brenda Miles is a man by the name of Jim Jardine. And Jim Jardine is also a member of Skull and Bones. So I can't prove that Russell Nelson hired Jim Jardine to be the lawyer, but I find it highly unusual that the man whose daughter is being represented is a member of Skull and Bones and the lawyer is a member of Skull and Bones. And then the way that case went just really sort of stinks to high heaven. And especially the occulting of like the facts of the case. I can't imagine being that girl who is now a grown woman by the time this case is filed, but being abused by your father, having to have surgeries on your body, which according to the court papers led to all of her children being born prematurely, getting the courage to file a case and then having Jim Jardine step on you like an ant and never talk about you and point people to Satanic Panic. It's
and
just
then Bill
really
also took the way out he did or allegedly did. I mean, that's so much trauma. And that actually causes the brain to split, the mind to split. Yeah. You know, I've learned through all this.
So my question to Jim Jardine, if I ever get to meet Jim, or if he ever decides to watch any of these things that I'm doing, is simply this. Like, Jim wants to represent this as a case of Satanic Panic and false memories implanted by a therapist that half the victims never even saw. But my question to Jim Jardine is, when is the last time that false memories led to surgery? And the answer, of course, is never.
Right.
False memories do not lead to surgery. But, you know, in this case, Jane Doe 4 had multiple surgeries at age 15 due to excessive scar tissue, and then, you know, had to have part of her body removed that I blacked out because it's very personal. But they put it in the court documents, so we know that it happened.
Right.
The other really weird thing about this is that, you know, Jim Jardine is not a lawyer for sexual abuse cases. If you go even today and look him up online, you'll see that Mr. Jardine's practice focuses on prosecuting and defending commercial litigation matters and emphasizes complex business, antitrust, securities, and intellectual property litigation, right? So why in the world is Jim Jardine hired to represent the Mileses in a child sexual abuse case if his specialty is commercial litigation matters? And to me, the answer seems pretty obvious. And it's that he was a Skull and Bones member, and so was Russell M. Nelson. And this is what they do. They vow to protect each other.
And think about how Glenn Pace, he was an accountant tasked to do that investigation into all those ritualistic claims, you know. And then here you have this guy who it's like, you're above your pay grade, dude. Like, but at least Bishop Pace knew his damn limit. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guarantee you're not above Jim Jardine's pay limit. That guy is a very powerful, prominent lawyer, but you're certainly outside of his area of expertise.
Right. There's so many lawyers. There are so many attorneys out there. I mean, Curtin McConkie does everything else. What's the damn difference?
Yeah. So
Why
what Jim
aren't they?
Jardine is good at is he's a great lawyer that knows how to use the legal system to make sure that his clients, like have the best representation possible. And again, like this is whether that's moral and ethical. Like I know lawyers, and like their job is it's not to make a judgment about whether their client is innocent or guilty. It's
Right.
to represent their client the best they can. And Jim did that. And like Jim is a brilliant lawyer. Like I said that in the other interview, and I'm quite certain of it, just looking at his
Mhm.
career, but he also represented Paul Dunn, who is the Mormon apostle who got caught lying in um, all of his general conference
All
talks.
the
So,
stories.
so Jim doesn't really have I don't know.
The
I don't know
leg
how
to
to think
stand
about
on.
that,
It's like
but,
we've said
but
this about Lori. It's like defending the indefendable, like or
well,
the
somebody has
undefendable.
to defend the indefensible. Somebody has to do it,
Right.
right? But you can do
Yeah.
it a couple different ways. You can do it by letting everybody know all the information and doing your best to protect your client. Or you can do
Mhm.
what Jim Jardine did, which is make sure that nobody knows the actual facts of the case and throw a bunch of
Mhm.
smoke up about satanic panic and false memories
Yeah.
and make
It's
it so
so
confusing for people that they just give up trying to learn the truth.
it's so trashing.
So, in my
That
opinion, I would agree with
it's
you. I
like
think it was
playing
very
mud,
trashy. That's a really good way of saying it,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
If
Anyway,
they don't fight fair, that's the stinky part. It's just like fight fair, but I
yeah,
believe a lot of these people don't.
yeah, I would agree.
Sure.
So, anyway, um, we know that Jim Jardine lied in his his Utah Supreme Court briefing. I won't go into too much detail, but the way that this worked is that the Miles case was put on hold because there was another case called the Mitchell case, and the ruling in the Mitchell case was going to affect the Miles case, according to Jim Jardine's argument. And so the prosecution wanted to expedite the case because they wanted to depose Russell M. Nelson and find out what his role was in all this. But Jim Jardine successfully delayed the case. The judge ruled that they weren't going to hear the case until the Mitchell case was done. Jardine inserts himself into the Mitchell case. He writes a brief. In the brief, he lies about a reversed conviction that never happened. Somehow the Utah Supreme Court doesn't see that. And in the end, they rule to dismiss the Mitchell case, which the domino effect means that the Miles case is also dismissed on procedural grounds. So the evidence is never heard. Depositions are never taken. Evidence and testimony are never presented, but the case is dismissed with prejudice, which means that it can never be brought again. The
Oh,
reason that this is so like gross and nasty to me is that it didn't just affect the Miles's victims or the alleged victims, excuse me, and Karstenson's victims. An entire generation of Utah sexual abuse victims were affected by this
yeah.
because when they reversed the law, it wasn't just the Mileses who were affected by that. Like there was a
Mm.
whole generation of perpetrators who needed to think twice because that statute of limitations was now in play, that extended statute of limitations. But when Jim Jardine, involved himself in this case and did what they did, they took away not only the rights of the victims in this case, but in who knows how many other cases. And the
Yeah.
justice system became unavailable to a whole group of people who should have had the right to
And
seek
and
justice.
you lose faith in the justice system also, not just the
Right.
ecclesiastical, but also in your oh my gosh. Man, you are really good at, like, bringing it home, okay? Because
Mhm.
and I think like that too, but it just oh, man. That's so betrayal. That's so betraying,
All to protect the image and assets of the Mormon Church and its prophet.
yeah,
Like,
I don't get
why,
it.
if you were like you said earlier, if Russell M. Nelson is innocent, why not allow yourself to be deposed and tell the true story? Why hire a skull and bones lawyer to run lawfare for you, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that
Mhm.
you never have to tell this story. Russell M. Nelson is almost 101 years old. It's been 80 something years since he started making death oaths with groups like Sigma Chi and Skull and Bones. And
Oh my
then,
gosh.
got involved in 1986. It's been 40 years since then. And he's never, not once, told his side of the story. He's hidden in the ivory tower there in Salt Lake City behind billions of dollars, security teams, and a whole host of people who would do anything and have made covenants to do anything to protect
Mhm.
him and the church. And it's
Yeah.
just kind of a cowardly way to go out, you know, like my heart honestly hurts for Russell and Nelson in a lot of ways, because it must be a heavy burden to have gone through those experiences and never been able to tell your side of the story. Like,
right. And what
I
about
can't
Brenda
imagine
and
being
Dick?
101 and knowing that you're going to die very soon and knowing that you're holding on to these types of secrets. Like, so
Yeah.
I don't like, I mean, I have some sympathy for him. In the end, like, it's his responsibility to do the right thing. And in my opinion, he's chosen not to do the right thing. And so
If
it's only some sympathy, but my heart hurts for him in some ways, you know?
he's the leader of a whole church. And I
Yeah.
mean, again, time and time again, I've seen it because I've studied this system all these years now. I still can't articulate it I can't verbally, talk about, I'm not good at it. But I can point out all the things, on paper I'm better, but it's like lead by example. It's so simple, but
Yeah.
but everybody complicates it.
Yeah.
All these
Imagine
people
the good.
are,
Imagine the good that would come. Let's just say that I'm completely wrong. Let's say that I've done all this research and I've made all these inferences and I've drawn some conclusions that I think are accurate, but let's just say that I'm 100% wrong.
I hope
What
you are.
good would
We
it
all
do?
hope
Like,
you
can
are.
you imagine the good it would do if Russell M. Nelson came out and said, hey, I would like to tell you my life story, and it involves some really bad choices, but I repented of those things, and Jesus Christ redeemed me, and then I became this powerful leader in the church, and I've done so much good. Like, how much good would it do for Russell M. Nelson to come out and just tell his side of the story if he's innocent? Like,
Right.
I think it would do a tremendous amount of good for people.
The same as
But
Tom.
instead, he
Yeah.
cowers in Salt Lake in this ivory tower. He makes sure that he gets lawyers involved, and he makes sure that he never has to tell this story, which just, whether he's innocent or not, it makes him look guilty,
But
right?
what about the alleged victims? What about their justice and their due process?
Right.
Like they were told, like, I didn't know it was with prejudice. That is just, I'm so sorry if you're listening or watching. Okay. I'm so sorry that happened.
Yeah.
We have to break the cycles, y'all. I mean, because I'm sure, and this is just me speculating, of course, uh, President Nelson, you can come on and straighten it out with us if you want to. You're
He
welcome.
only writes articles for Time magazine. He doesn't come on small
Oh,
podcasts.
dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wrong class for me, right? But like it's the same thing. I don't know. It's the same thing if Tom Harrison. It's the same thing if Lori and Chad would have just been up front and maybe gotten a divorce and not. It's a big mess, and it becomes messier because then it affects so many people around it. I'm not even
Yeah.
Mormon. I've never been Mormon. I'm nowhere near a temple, and here I am affected by his leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way he,
I could be wrong, but I consider it very poor leadership. Like, if you're going to take the reins of a global church
Mhm.
and corporation, and
Representing
these
Christ.
types of things become known, like, as a leader, I feel that you have a responsibility to address them. And so I
Absolutely.
do. I consider it poor leadership.
And Justin, I know you wish that you could be proven wrong, right?
Sure.
That's
Sure.
how yeah.
Yeah. Nothing would make me happier than for somebody to come out with a better argument than the one that I'm making.
Or proof, or yeah, just easy, simple, here, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Here, I'm
So
being held, I'm accountable,
yeah, it's really interesting that you bring that up. And I think we have about a half an hour left. It's just, like, this might be a good place to talk about that because, so for example, Russell M. Nelson's membership in Skull and Bones is really interesting because, as I talked about on We the People, we have really good evidence for what type of organization Skull and Bones was before Russell M. Nelson was there. And we have really good evidence for what type of organization Skull and Bones was after Nelson was there. But there's sort of this black box of when Nelson was there. And so, like, in terms of what you're saying, so let me just show you really quick, okay? I actually pulled this up. I didn't know if we were going to get there, but we did. So
Okay.
here is Skull and Bones in the Utonian
Okay.
in 1910, and there's some historically, we're not exactly sure when Skull and Bones fired up at the University of Utah. For example, I have a 1909 article that talks about in the Salt Lake Tribune how new men were taken into Skull and Bones. And it talks about like the hijinks and like all the fun things that you talk about that they actually do talk about publicly. And then it says, but this was only the first degree of the initiation. It is reported the second degree will be given Thursday, while the third degree will be put on in an old mine up in the Red Butte Canyon next Friday. Okay, the final stunt consists of an entertainment of the Allen Key Club by the new members of the Skull and Bones next Monday. So we know that by 1909, the Salt Lake Tribune is reporting on Skull and Bones at the University of Utah. We know that in 1910, they introduced themselves in the yearbook. And I just want you to see, like, I get, again, like one of the things that people in the church want to fight with me about so much is that the University of Utah Skull and Bones chapter is nothing like the Yale chapter. And it's not from Yale, even though the yearbook says multiple times it's from Yale, as does this article in their school newspaper. It says right here, earlier that year, a Yale alumnus founded a chapter at the University of Utah. Okay. So you can tell me that it's not, but your historical documents tell me that it is. Now, what I want you to look at is this first name is A.A. Anderson. Okay. So if you go and find A.A. Anderson in this same edition of the yearbook, you'll see they have these little statements about like that describe their personalities, right? And look, I get it. It's a yearbook. We all have yearbooks, and like it's like most likely to whatever, and sometimes it's funny and whatever. But look at what's under.
It's a belief. It's a belief system.
And there's a kernel of truth in it always, right? So look at what's under A.A. Anderson. It says lie, steal, murder, burn, fight, anything for a little excitement.
That's right? Our people.
That's our people. I love it.
That's what we're dealing with now.
Those are the people. That's the first member that we know of.
Mindset. That's the mindset. Right? And we know Anderson is, I don't know if they're related to them, but I'm just saying, when I hear Anderson, I duck. I'm like, I flinch a little bit.
So again, look, I mean, I know that this doesn't mean that he was literally lying and literally stealing and literally murdering. I get it. But there's a kernel of truth in here about the type of people that you're dealing with. And it's not just an honor society. You don't show up to honors. Let's see. Can I find do I have it? Oh, I know where it is. Here we go. In this same article. If you're an honors student, do you show up to your interview in a death mask and black robes?
Don't everybody?
Does that scream out
Come on,
honor society to you? Right? No.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Why hide then? Why hide?
Right.
It is stupid. You said it. It's good. It's stupid.
All this stuff is so fraternities and these secret societies, it's all built on what we call shame bonding. And it's where you get with a group of people and you commit acts that are shameful and you create a shame bond. Everybody's probably heard of trauma bonding, but most people don't understand shame bonding. But the currency of fraternities and secret societies is shame bonding. And it's just silly. It's a bunch of silly little boys who feel uncertain about their future and know that if they're willing to act inappropriately in a shameful way and bond with others who are willing to do the same thing, that it might lead them to a better future in their mind. But it's very myopic, right? And look, I don't say this like in a judgmental way. I was a couple days away from joining Kappa Sigma at the University of Denver. I was tapped to join a fraternity.
Okay, hold on. So my Uncle Charles was Kappa Sig. And so look, I want to know the truth. And so I just haven't had the chance to, I'm kind of working my way backwards, start with the big LDS Church. And then, finally at the end of my life, maybe I will have learned about my own family. Just kidding. Yeah. But it makes me wonder, was Uncle Charles a Freemason? What, because they stay well connected. And I just want to know.
Yeah. It's not also all fraternities are based in Freemasonry. Like you can just research that on the internet.
He was Kappa Sig. And I remember my fiance saying, wow, I mean, a couple of years ago, he was like, Charles looks like he could have belonged to a Freemason. Sure. He could have been a Freemason or something. And I was like, what, really? But I mean, I didn't really know about these organizations and really, I knew of them, but not really.
Sure. And it's not that every fraternity man is going to end up
all bad. Nothing's all
right.
good.
Yeah, there's good and there's bad, right? And so that's another thing people want to throw at me all the time is like, well, oh, you think all fraternity brothers are criminals. And like, no, that's stupid. Like, it's a stupid argument, right?
No, just the
Like,
leaders. Just kidding.
but what we do know is that organizations like this, like they have a reputation for a reason, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, this is the point, right?
Yeah. And
They
so like,
and they stay connected too. They're connected and then they help each other out. They network. I mean, this is
yeah.
what it is.
And then the larger point for me as a former member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is if you know, so the reason I didn't join Kappa Sigma is twofold. One, I kind of caught wind of what they were going to ask us to do during the initiation, and I was not going to do that. Like, I am not a person who's willing to make a fool of myself in order to make friends, right?
Right.
And I'm not really interested in shame bonding.
You're not going to sell
But
yourself.
two was that I was a member of the church, and I knew what the reputation of these fraternities was, and I didn't want to affiliate with groups that had that type of reputation because I was a member of the church. So it's really hurtful to me that so many leaders in my church had the opportunity to do the right thing and not join themselves to these organizations, and made a really poor choice, in my opinion, to associate and affiliate with organizations that have a reputation like Sigma Chi at the University of Utah does, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they could have made a better choice.
Justin,
it's about integrity. Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it hurts.
And
that
prioritizing.
hurts to see them do that and then not be willing to address it.
Right.
The person who excommunicated me, my stake president, is also a member of Sigma Chi. And I mean, so in his case, he actually joined Sigma Chi before he joined the church. So it's a little bit of a different situation, right? But I had to, like, the entire time I was being excommunicated, I had to wonder whether Russell M. Nelson, the Sigma Chi member, was going to help my stake president, the Sigma Chi stake president, or vice versa, and whether there was something that I didn't know about that relationship that I needed to know in order to protect myself against the charges that were leveled against me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that should never happen to anybody in a church.
No.
We should all have our allegiance to Jesus Christ, right?
Or at least you think,
You would hope. Yeah. You would
hope.
You
would hope. It's so it's unfortunate, but I just feel bad for, like, you and your experience in the church, and just because you're researching, not just because whatever. I don't think
there's more to it than that.
For merit. I mean, but so people who ask questions are they're the pot stirrers, right? They're the problematic people, and we must intimidate them. We must get rid of them. We must take away their spiritual afterlife. I mean, because really, that is so heavy to me. That is like huge.
Well, and to be clear, it's not simply people that ask questions. The church allows people. I asked questions for 45 years. I never was not like this. Like the Justin you see today is the same Justin that grew up. Like, I just am curious and I want to know answers, and I research. The problem occurred not when I was doing research. The problem occurred when I needed answers that they weren't willing to give, and I wasn't willing to just stop when they told me to. That's when the problem occurs. So I don't want people to think that the church isn't a place where you can ask questions. It is. You can ask a lot of questions, but once you're told to stop, if you aren't willing to stop, then you're going to find yourself in some deep water, right? And in my case, like, it was deeper water than I was able to swim in, and they ended up excommunicating me for it,
But I mean, could it be? Hold on, I think I just forgot it. Oh my God, y'all! I'm so sorry. I'm so spacey today. No, but do you think that it's like they give you perimeters, and say, don't think outside? Oh, this is what I was going to ask. If it's because you kept going because your intuition and because of what you had already learned, you were finding out more truth, and then you just had to weigh that out in your own mind.
Yeah, I kept going for a couple of reasons. I kept going partly because of intuition, but mostly because the facts, the more I learned, the more clear it was that these men were acting in immoral, unethical, and sometimes illegal ways. And to keep my own integrity, I can't stop, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't learn about these kinds of things and then go to church and say that you love your brothers and sisters when you know that the leadership is engaging in immoral, unethical, and illegal activity.
Right. And then so you don't want other people to be hurt. So you're a protector too.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you have feelings.
I
I
knew
really
I knew
do.
months and months before I got excommunicated that it was going to happen. And so luckily my excommunication wasn't like it wasn't
Yeah.
terribly traumatic. It was traumatic, and it's been hard to be away from the congregation. Like I certainly miss um, going on Sundays and being around people that I loved and served, and the people that loved and served me. That's very difficult. But in a lot of ways, it's been healing to be out of the church. I
Yeah.
think I needed to step away for a while, and so there's been a lot of healing that's taken place too. So
Did it make you become more self-reliant?
absolutely, sure. Like yeah, I mean, there's nobody else to rely on anymore in terms of my relationship with Jesus Christ, right? Like
Right. No
I can't
middleman.
say the bishop told me to do that. I can't say the prophet
Yeah.
told me to do that. All my
Oh,
decisions are my decisions now, and I'm going to be accountable for all the decisions that I've made. And so, yeah,
yeah.
that's been incredibly helpful in my life to help me mature in my discipleship, because I still consider myself a disciple of Jesus Christ. And
Yeah.
so that that's been one good thing that's happened from excommunication, is recognizing that it's just me and the Lord, you know. So
I love that. I really do, and I'm just so proud of you. You should go when we get off of here, go to the mirror, look at yourself, and, like, give yourself a hug, okay? I heard this one lady say it one time.
I can't say that I'm going to commit to that, Kresha, but maybe, yeah, maybe I
Take the
will.
mirror and point it at the church, and just and be like, "Here."
That's funny. No, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, it's hard
You've come a
sometimes.
long way.
Like
You've come a long
you
way.
never know if you've done the right thing. It's the world is complex, and
Yeah.
I've always said the appearance of evil doesn't indicate the presence of evil, and I worry sometimes that just because there's a huge appearance of evil, that people are going to judge that there's the presence of evil, and then we're eventually going to find out that there was no evil involved at all. Like that's my worst nightmare, because I have
Hey,
to go meet the Savior at some point,
that's
and
so
like
interesting.
the worst
Huh,
thing that could happen is I get up there to heaven and I go to meet the Lord, and he says, wow, like that was pretty wild, but you were totally wrong. Like, what am I going to say? Right.
right.
Like, but I
Yeah,
can tell
no.
you what I'll say is I did my best. Like, that's one thing
Yeah.
I can tell people, is that I've never acted out of malice or enmity.
Mm,
Like, I simply want people to have as much information as they possibly can so that they can make wise and informed decisions
yeah.
about where to worship, and then to protect their children, especially.
It's
Like,
it's the right thing to do.
the
It's the
harm that
right
I've
thing to
seen
do.
the church do to families and children who've been abused is staggering. And I don't want anybody to have to go through that ever again, ever. It's
So
just
it's
not,
not at
it's
all
not fair.
reminiscent. Is it does it make the, what do they call it? Oh my gosh, you'll know it. Eternal families. That I forget what it's called.
Right.
But does it make that plan or blueprint, does it make that impossible?
I don't
Okay,
know.
I'm sorry.
Impossible is a
That
difficult
was
word.
kind of big.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
impossible is a hard word, right? But like, here's what I've seen over and over again is church members who are abused by a priesthood holder, usually like 99% of the time, it's a priesthood holder, usually somebody related to them. And then they find out about the abuse and they think they can go to the church because they trust the church, and they
yeah.
think they can go there to heal. And what happens is, instead of being healed, there's in the abuse space, there's what's called the second wound. So
Mm,
the first wound is obviously the abuse itself. The second wound is when you go to get help and you're not believed, or people actively act against your interests to protect their
mhm,
interests. And they call that the second wound. And
mm,
what I see over and over again is families torn apart because they go to get help from the church in cases of abuse, but instead of dealing with the church, they end up dealing with the corporation.
yep,
And the corporation doesn't really care about the abuse victims. Like, I hate to say that, but like what the corporation really cares about is the brand, and they care about protecting their image and assets. And
at
so
all
these
costs.
poor people go to get help, and they just get run over by a multi-billion-dollar worldwide corporation that they have, unless you have like a recording, or unless you have emails, or unless you have like
Yeah.
serious proof, like you're just
And then
not
the
going to be.
NDAs, the NDA
Yes, and
thing
then they make you sign
freaks me
NDAs,
out,
right? Which is
and they
just
keep it
insane,
secret
right?
there.
Yeah.
I don't blame the
So
victims for taking the offer. No, they're entitled to that.
of
But I
course,
shame
that's
the
what they feel
church
is
for
best for
doing
them.
that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. They
So yeah, I mean,
endured the abuse, so it's only right. It just can't be
it's an
right on
earth-shattering.
one-sided.
Yeah, it's an
I'm sorry.
earth-shattering experience. Like I've just seen over and over, like with abuse victims and their families. It completely turns their world upside down, and they, like, a lot of them lose, like, the church is their identity, and they end up losing their identity for a while, trying to figure out who they are and what it is they believe, because everything that they thought they were and what they thought that everybody around them believed in ends up, in their case, not being true. I mean, it's pretty horrific to see what
Yeah.
happens. You know?
It's so sad. And I remember there's so many times that in the beginning of the case of unfolding and everything with Lori and Chad, it's like everybody, I mean, because again, I'm not in the church. Anyways, and it doesn't matter. I just was seeing a lot of indiscrepancies. Like, we don't teach the church of the firstborn. We don't teach the 144,000.
Right.
And I'm just like, well, wait, don't y'all have a Bible? Like, I was so confused. Like, I don't know. I'm not a scriptorian or anything.
Yeah.
I
No, I
don't
mean,
know.
I can tell you, having been in the church for 45 years, I mean, for anybody to say those things, it's at best disingenuous, and at worst, it's just an outright lie. Like,
Or
these are things that we talk about them, right? They may not
yeah,
be what they consider like doctrine necessarily, I guess, maybe, but like these are
I've seen
church members talk about these things all the time.
Yeah, I see them constantly, when I've gone and researched into the scriptures and everything. And then
Yeah.
that's just the scriptures and not what the apostles write about or the leader. You know what I'm saying? It just
Yeah.
goes on and on and on. And I'm like, how can they not see this?
Yeah.
It's actually, I think it's prophesied for the church of the firstborn to become like when Jesus comes back, I
Sure.
think.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
pretty
yeah,
sure if
there's
I'm hearing
nothing
that
they're
right.
teaching that's so out there that, I mean, like probably
Yeah.
like some of the weirdest stuff is like kolob, right? That's a very unique Mormon belief that comes from the book of Abraham. And so but everything else, like a lot of stuff comes that other Christian religions think
Yeah.
about and talk about and teach about as well. I don't know why
It's
the
just
Mormons
not
have so much shame about their beliefs. Like, if you're going to believe it and stand by it, instead of
right.
pretending that you don't teach it, which just
Yeah.
happens way too much,
Or
you
you
know?
do for a little bit, but then, ooh, no
Right.
more
Yeah.
planet for you. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
own
Yeah.
it.
The God. Yeah.
Own
Yeah.
it.
I hear you.
I
So,
mean, and that's what the missionaries do. They go out there and they, I don't know. It's just, it could be so beautiful. It really could. But
yeah.
I
Well, I mean,
mean,
I
isn't it
think,
prophesied for Revelation to happen anyways? Like it's gonna be bad. Like I'm
yeah.
like, it's prophesied. It's prophesied. Like,
Yeah.
what are we expecting? It's just like how people expect a happy ending. I hate using that phrase, but a happy ending uh, to the evil that exists when like what Lori and Chad did. There's dead, murdered children, dismembered, burned, uh thrown about, just the most depraved acts known to man. Okay,
Yeah.
like there's no word that's good enough to like, I feel like the devil is even looking, it drops his head and is just like,
He's
oh my
trembling.
god.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's so gross. And so I don't have a word, a descriptor for that. Just depraved. I don't know, but
Well,
it's
I think I've told you privately, but I do want to say it publicly. I don't, like, I no longer represent the church in any way, but I was a member of the church when a lot of this was going on. And I hope that somebody from the church at some point has come and just told you that, like, I mean, it was Lori and Chad that made the decision, right?
yes, yep.
But I'm really sorry that your family had to experience what they had to because of two members of the church who just let themselves go way too far into places that they shouldn't have been. And like, I'm so sorry for the pain and suffering that was caused by people who got wrapped up in a belief system that has some wild fringes and then weren't reined in by the people who were responsible for reining them in. It's a tragic situation, and I'm very sorry for all the pain that you guys have endured.
Thank you for that. I'm glad I'm not on the camera right now. Okay, thank you. Um, no, yeah, I appreciate it. That's really all I think that I was looking for was just compassion. Like just understand and instead of defending, and like it can happen. Nobody is exalted, and not even
Not
Lori.
here,
Okay.
that's for sure. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, she believes that she's still a member of the church. And I mean, whatever. It all becomes technicalities after that. It's just, like an excommunication to me means nothing, right? Because I'm not in that system. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand now, but I was like, well, what? I don't even know what that is,
Right.
But I
Right.
mean, it's just, I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I think it's important that we lend compassion instead of saying, "Oh, you're in a cult," right? That's not
Right.
constructive, period. Because
Right.
look, I'm not in a cult, allegedly. I don't know. You never know.
You're
Because
part
when
of
I
a
saw
culture, right? Like we're all
for
parts of
sure,
a culture.
for
Yeah.
sure, it's
Yeah.
opened up my eyes to seeing a lot of how that affects people, how that drives their lives. I mean, I live in we live in parishes here, in
Hmm.
Louisiana. We're the only state with parishes,
Yeah.
and it's because of the church, the Catholic Church. I mean, anyways. I mean, my uncle Charles grew up in an extreme type of childhood. Basically, my grandfather went to Rome even and shook hands with the Pope. I'm a
Wow.
little like, oh my God, what secret society does he belong to? And he was a banker, right? I'm like, oh no, this is not good.
That's
I'll find out. I'll let y'all know when I find out. But
funny.
y'all can help me, dry up my tears. But I mean, it's all about breaking these curses, I think. Generational trauma. And that
Yeah.
way, it's like, yes, my kids are in their 20s, but it's like, at least it's like you catch that before and you acknowledge it and you're like, whoa, whoa. I mean, that's been my experience. Like, oh my gosh, yes. I-
Right.
I've I've lived in a home with parents that were there physically. Okay, it's
Hmm.
kinda like the PMO, the physically in,
Yeah.
mentally out.
Physically and mentally out.
And
Yeah.
totally. Like, my mom was always there, my dad was always there, but it's like they weren't there emotionally, and that is damaging,
Right.
okay? And I mean, that's something that's, I don't think, intentional, it's just that maybe happened to them, and so, again, you carry that on to your young ones, and same thing, history repeats
Yeah.
itself. So it's like I want to I hope to put a bigger kink in the chain. That's my goal. Like, I
Yes.
know that I can't fix it all, but
That's
you
right.
are putting a kink in the chain in
Yeah.
the system that you are talking about.
I
Like,
love it.
and anyways, it just, we need more people. We need more people who are willing to dig and just, I've been so scared so many times of being called a conspiracy theorist, and I'm like, "It's not my conspiracy." Like, I'm tracking them. This is what they believe. And
Yeah.
so it's been, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I can just speculate according to the evidence and receipts that I find along the way,
Yeah.
because I'm just trying to understand how we got here, because we got
Yeah.
here and people have gotten here before.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's
that's
gonna
I think
happen.
that's why we get along so well. I think we both have the same motive. Like we just want to understand, right?
Yeah.
Like you see
It's
something and it doesn't make sense, and some people just move on with their lives, but some of us, like, we want to understand why people do what they do, and what we can
yeah,
do to stop it from happening again, right?
yep. True crimers, they profile people, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I'm just saying, like, it just is interesting to know what motivates somebody, and how Lori went from being my aunt, um, who I thought was beautiful, and funny,
Right.
and she was very engaging. I didn't know about all that other stuff. I've learned that along the way, the hard way, just like everybody else, because people present to you what they want to. We're
Yes.
projectors. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And so we just have to, like, I believe, is that kind of like with when you're on a plane and it's going down and the oxygen mask drops, make sure you're okay.
Yeah. Get yours on first.
Take
Yeah.
care of you, and then we can be better people, I think, for everybody else.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, honestly, like, I haven't really talked about it with anybody else, but I don't mind sharing. Like, I think that's a mistake that I made, like in my own journey, is that when I started this research, like I did not have my mask on. And you can see it in like in the work I was doing. Like I'm flailing around and I'm in trauma loop and I'm just trauma vomiting all over Twitter. And like, so I wish I had taken the time to get a little bit more stabilized and get my mask on before I started sharing the things that I did. So hopefully now, like, I mean, I've had 2 years to learn and grow and heal a little bit. And I'm hoping that I'm at a point where I have that mask on and now we can turn to help other people. That's my hope.
That is awesome. I'm just so look, I'm smiling so big back here. And just give yourself a little grace sometimes. I know I'm basically telling myself that too. So I mean, I'm good at giving advice. I'm not good at taking my own, right?
Right.
So anytime you want to borrow an oxygen mask, I have one here for you with your name on it. And, you're doing the right thing. We don't know. And so it's trial and error. Okay. And I think that's
Yes.
what shapes us. And I too did not want to become cynical. And I've been like, oh my God, just screw it.
Yeah.
They're all bad, but it comes in waves, it's ebb and flows and we live and learn, right? We're gonna continue to do this until we die. At least I hope. Like I don't want to just have, to know everything. I mean, it's not possible. I hope. I don't want to know. Like I want to. That keeps me interested in life. Period. So, but I don't know.
Well, hey, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure being with you. I apologize. I do have a hard stop here at 1:00, but it was so wonderful being on here with you. And let's do it again soon.
Yes, it's a date. Well,
All right.
All right, Justin. Thank you.
All right. Talk to
Bye,
you later.
guys.
Bye.